people working for him and make sure he gets rid of the corrupt politicians that were there before. More than democracy, we are defending honesty. We have always fought against corruption, and we will continue to do that until we can see a change in Guatemala.
But his colleague, Ana Alvarado, the treasurer of the 48 cantones, who we also heard from earlier on in the program, is cautiously hopeful.
I was there in the capital when he finally became president, and I was allowed to say a few words in the ceremony. I said to him, "Señor President, I hope you appreciate all the effort this country made for you." There were pregnant women and old people all celebrating, and we said we managed it. I said, "Now you as the government must show us that our efforts were worth it."
And she thinks those efforts were worth it, but Guatemalans need to be realistic and patient.
And now I have seen the new government. I really think the people working in it want to help us and make things better. But it's going to take time to dismantle years of corruption. In the time he has left, it's crucial he gets rid of the corrupt people and replaces them with people who really want to work and to serve the country in a good way.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Assignment on the BBC World Service. I'm Jane Chambers. The editor was Penny Murphy.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we are live downtown with you this morning, as always. Another crunchy day ahead. Some snow is going to come our way, and yeah, there's going to be a bit of a churn over the next couple of days. It's going to make driving a little bit slick, sketchy, got a mixed bag of things. Let's start in Winnipeg. Mostly cloudy. We're -2 right now. Snow will begin early this morning, and a risk of freezing rain early this afternoon. In Winnipeg, as I mentioned, -2 right now. In Brandon, you are waking up to light snow already. It's -3. And the cold spot in the province is actually Thompson at -31. The show is Information Radio on CBC. We're with you until 8:37 this morning. Commuter line's always open at 788-3093. Chloe Friesen's going to pick it up today. Chloe is directing the program, filling in for Corey and covering the commute. Good morning, Chloe. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi behind the controls of the program, as always, our lead technical producer on the show. And Abby's on air covering weather with us. And Kevin Nipatebo is our YouTube producer, waving hello right now. All right, let's get into the news of the day in Manitoba. 2 minutes to 6, and Heather Wells is here with headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's health minister says it is a shameful part of this province's history, but new legislation would ensure Manitobans can no longer be locked up for health reasons. The law would require all applications to detain people for public health reasons to be heard in open court by a provincial court justice, and they could only be sent to a health facility, not a jail. We'll give you some background about this story coming up at 6:30. As well, questions about the future of the Bay. CBC asked HBC about potential store closures. It says no decisions have been finalized. Chi Liao at the Esper School of Business says an outside buyer could still come in and buy HBC and take it in a new direction. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
We have a retail expert on as well in our program in the second hour of the show to look at the Bay and what led us to this moment. Also, is there something generationally that led us to this moment and how different generations shop? Are we seeing the decline overall of the department store? That's going to be part of our conversation this morning. In addition, the Premier of Manitoba, Wab Canoe, is on the show for our monthly interview today. We're going to talk about what getting tougher with the U.S. and tariffs might look like. What is Manitoba's next move, especially when it comes to our energy exports? So that's coming up as well. Stay with us.
On Q with Tom Power.
Did you know the guy behind Never Gonna Give You Up gave up music at 27? The global superstar Rick Astley was ready to walk away until the Rickroll craze on the internet brought him back. He'll be here to tell you that and some news stories from his memoir, Never. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
I said to Secretary Lutnick, Howard, we're on a race to the basement here. There's no prize to get to the basement first.
Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc speaking about tariffs and counter-tariffs. LeBlanc and Ontario Premier Doug Ford will join Canada's Ambassador Kirsten Hillman in Washington today for high-level talks with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The meeting comes as the trade war between the two countries is ratcheting up. The CBC's Sarah Levitt is in Washington. Sarah, what are we expecting from today's meeting?
Well, this is another face-to-face meeting between Lutnick and LeBlanc, but things have considerably escalated since the last time they spoke. LeBlanc has said he's going in with optimism. Perhaps not that the Trump administration removes the tariffs immediately, but more to calm things down a bit, to stop the back and forth between Canada and the U.S., or even the continued threat of slapping more tariffs on Canada, as President Trump has said. But LeBlanc has also said the U.S. can't expect Canada to sit idly by while the country's economy is threatened.
They knew we were going to respond, but that I hope we could get to a position where we can lower the temperature and figure out how to get to their April 2nd date for their reciprocal tariff decisions, where we can respect the free trade agreement between Canada and the United States and remove all these tariffs.
Lutnick has used that exact same phrase, by the way, wanting to lower the temperature.
Meanwhile, Sarah, what reaction has there been in the U.S. to the trade war?
There's a lot more awareness that this is going on now. A few weeks ago, the tariffs on Canada weren't much of a talking point here. Now it's front page news. Above the fold of the Wall Street Journal today is all tariff talk, featuring a photo of Prime Minister-designate Mark Carney. The Washington Post has a headline, quote, "Warnings of more trade war escalations." That's not to say President Trump doesn't have support. He has said this is all about bolstering American production, and some are saying in the long run, these tariffs will do just that.
CBC's Sarah Levitt in Washington. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Now that the detailed list of Canada's retaliatory tariffs is public, we're getting a clearer picture of how shoppers in this country will be affected. Janice McGregor has been taking a closer look in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, we know there is a price to pay for hitting back at the U.S. with counter tariffs. What is that price?
John, if you need stuff for a summer camping trip, the axe you cut your firewood with, the candles, lamps, or flashlights you use to see at night, the sleeping bag you crawl into, all those things are now going to be 25% more expensive if they come from the U.S. Where possible, it appears the government has targeted things that are nice to have, not things you need to have with this list. You don't see a lot of food on it. It's not really targeted this time, although some of the dishes you need to eat that food are. There's equipment for hobbies like golf clubs that are getting hit. Because Canada exports more steel and aluminum to the U.S. in dollar terms than it imports in return, to match the value of this tariff, dollar for dollar, the government had to hit things beyond just metal products. But Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc also said yesterday that they're still studying the U.S. list to tally up its impact on Canada. And it is possible that Canada is going to have to add more to this list if it finds its estimate of about $30 billion worth of impacted trade was actually a bit too low. And of course, there's another list in the wings of additional U.S. products that Canadians will start paying tariffs on if the Trump administration proceeds with plans to apply more global tariffs in early April. LeBlanc was asked if it's going to be awkward to implement that if there's an election underway by then. He said civil servants can just press go on the longer list when it's warranted, bringing the total value of U.S. goods facing tariffs in Canada as high as $155 billion.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Liberal leader Mark Carney will be sworn in as Prime Minister tomorrow morning. So will his new cabinet at a ceremony at Rideau Hall in Ottawa. CBC News has learned that Carney's cabinet will be much smaller, perhaps just 15 to 20 ministers, down from Justin Trudeau's 37. But key members, including Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, and Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne, are expected to remain. U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is reportedly now in Moscow. He's expected to take part in talks on a 30-day ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. The deal was agreed to by Kyiv earlier this week. Russia has not yet responded. The CBC's Anna Cunningham has more from London.
There's a lot riding on this meeting in Moscow.
Ukraine wants peace,
says Ukraine's ambassador to Canada, Yulia Kovalev. Speaking to CBC News, she says the deal for a 30-day ceasefire agreed in Jeddah is vital.
This could be an important first step to the long and lasting peace. That's now from Russia to demonstrate where they are.
But President Vladimir Putin did not show signs of wanting peace Wednesday. He was seen dressed in army camouflage visiting troops in the Kursk region, telling his forces to destroy the enemy in Kursk in the shortest timeframe possible. Ukraine's army commander, General Alexander Syrskyi, says his troops are pulling back to minimize losses. In military speak, that is a withdrawal. Doubts remain about Putin's willingness to agree to peace.
They're going to make up things that they say that they want in order to discuss a ceasefire.
Kirk Volker is the former U.S. Special Representative to Ukraine during President Donald Trump's first term.
What they really want to do is continue fighting and taking territory.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova repeating today that any peacekeeping Western troops in Ukraine would be considered a direct involvement in the conflict with Russia. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Military officials in Pakistan say they've freed more than 300 people held hostage on a passenger train. It was attacked in Balochistan province on Tuesday by militants. They blew up the tracks and then opened fire on the train. This man describes his ordeal. The shooting lasted for 3 hours, he says. Then we were forced off the train. We didn't eat anything for 2 days. At least 25 people were killed in the attack. The Balochistan Liberation Army has claimed responsibility. Pakistan's army says 33 militants were killed during the rescue operation. 5 years after COVID was declared a pandemic, scientists are warning of the possibility of another, this one the H5N1 virus or bird flu. The virus mutates and spreads quickly and can infect humans. As Jennifer Yoon reports, Canadian public health experts are working to contain the threat.
You're preparing the plate with the antigen and then
Dr. Linda Huang examines a blood sample at the Public Health Lab at the BC Centre for Disease Control. She's developing an antibody test for bird flu and one of many Canadian scientists ramping up preparations against the virus many fear could cause the next pandemic.
It's a matter of when, not so much if, when avian influenza will affect humans.
A recent study suggests H5N1 is just one mutation away from being more transmissible between humans. There have already been 2 severe cases in North America, a BC teen who was hospitalized for 2 months and a senior in Louisiana who died. It's circulating widely in wild birds and in American cows.
These infectious agents don't respect borders.
Toronto family doctor Andrew Pinto leads a federally funded project preparing Canada for the next pandemic. He worries scientists will have a hard time sharing data, research, and information quickly.
If a new pandemic was to hit tomorrow, we would struggle with certain things. We would struggle with kind of information coordination, making sure the same evidence is reaching different decision makers.
International cooperation is crucial in monitoring and curbing the spread of bird flu, he says. And with birds starting to fly north this year, it'll be crucial that American and Canadian scientists keep collaborating. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Quebec company Couche-Tard is still pushing ahead with its efforts to take over Japan's 7-Eleven chain of convenience stores. And today it made its case directly to the Japanese public. CEO Alex Miller.
We believe there'll be significant interest in what we are doing. We will stand that up with world-class management, world-class infrastructure, and really high-quality sites.
Couche-Tard, which already owns Circle K, is offering $47 billion to the owner of 7-Eleven. It's been pursuing this takeover since last August. If it's successful, Couche-Tard would control about 20,000 convenience stores in the United States alone, but there are 85,000 7-Elevens globally, and so far, its owner is stonewalling the bid. Well, that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Now, if you're enjoying World Report, and we hope you are, please tell a friend or rate and review us. It helps spread the word. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. Our weather's going to turn today in Manitoba. We're going to have a real mixed bag of conditions. Right now in Winnipeg, though, it's pretty calm. It's mostly cloudy, and it is -2. I'm Marcy Marcusa, as mentioned. This is CBC. You're in Information Radio. This hour on the program, we're going to hear all about tonight's lunar eclipse and how you can prepare to see the bloodworm moon. A lot of people love that. We've had some beautiful moons and clear skies the last few nights, so we'll see what tonight is going to hold for us. We are expecting partly cloudy conditions, so we'll see. In addition this hour to politics, will Russian President Vladimir Putin accept a ceasefire plan drafted by the United States and Ukraine? At this hour, it would seem not, but moving forward, we're going to find out the latest on from an expert on international affairs who's going to look ahead to the expected meeting with the U.S. and Russia, so stay tuned for that. And we'll continue to talk trade in Washington. We'll have a look in a deeper way at what could come out of today's meeting with Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, and U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. You were probably hearing about it on World Report just now. All right, let's get to local Manitoba news headlines and developing stories. Heather Wells is live in our news center next. Good morning to you, Heather.
Good morning. Well, after pleas from the Manitoba government, Walmart is pulling machetes from its online sales and from store shelves right across Canada. Justice Minister Matt Weep says they understand the impact these weapons have on our streets. Earlier this week, Amazon announced it would no longer allow online sales of machetes to Manitoba addresses. And after more than a month of waiting,
do you want to build a snowman?
The cast of Rainbow Stage's production of Frozen have been chosen. 1,000 hopefuls auditioned, including 300 young people. We'll hear all about it in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
When that movie came out, my sister turned into a 10-year-old. She was so she would sing that to me and pinch my cheeks, and yeah.
I love that. Everybody did,
love.
I think. Yeah.
I know, right?
It's so magical.
I can't wait to hear more of that singing. They sound so cute. All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get into what's happening in the actual forecast. If you do want to build a snowman, you're in luck. Abby, what's going on?
Good morning. We're looking at a mix of cloudy skies, snow in the forecast. We also have a chance of freezing rain with temperatures staying well below freezing today. Snow is expected to taper off throughout the day in the southern regions. And if you look up north, you're going to be seeing conditions staying colder as you travel further north. But for conditions for Winnipeg and surrounding areas right now, -2 in the city, mostly cloudy outside. It will stay cloudy today with snow starting sometime this morning, and that should taper off in the afternoon. We do have this risk of freezing rain sometime in between your lunch break. Once the snow system passes through, you should see about 2 centimeters or so on the ground. It gets breezy at some points, will then warm to 0. For tonight, that partly cloudy conditions will stay with us, and then the good news is tomorrow we get to see a mix of sun and clouds throughout the day. But for today, we're going to deal with the snow this morning, which will clear in the afternoon, and that chance of freezing rain will be hanging with us. Right now, -2.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Chloe Friesen is in for Corey Funk this morning, and this is all these kind of changing conditions are always when driving gets really sketchy.
Yes, I was going to say, compared to yesterday, much more slippery this morning on my commute, at least. So do watch out for that. Maybe just give yourself a little extra time out there to come to a full stop. If you see anything on your commute this morning, we would love to hear from you. No matter how you get around, you can call our commuter line. We'll share that information, of course, with your fellow commuters. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
Well, as you've been hearing, we have a chance tonight with partly cloudy conditions in Winnipeg to be able to look up and for the first time in 3 years, witness a total lunar eclipse. It will be a full moon, also known as the bloodworm moon, and Manitoba is one of the best places where you can view it, actually. Scott Young is up early, and a planetarium astronomer with the Manitoba Museum, of course, and we appreciate you being on with us. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Marcy. How are you?
I'm very well. So Manitoba, one of the best places to view this. What time should we be out, and do we need perfect conditions?
Well, the clearer the skies, the better. So we're hoping for, the skies to be more on the clear than the cloudy side with the partly cloudy tonight. But as the moon is pretty bright, So that's something that will shine through some of the clouds. So we don't have to worry too much. Things will get started. Things will start being noticeable, I would say, about 10 minutes after midnight tonight. So it's a late night event, and it will basically go until about 5 in the morning. So it's a long kind of thing. I would say that if you can only watch for an hour, say, the best time would be around, 1:30 to 2:30 in the morning. That's when you're really going to start to notice the color change, which is the big highlight of these lunar eclipses, the moon going all blood red.
I'm looking at a photo of it right now. People are watching our show on YouTube. They're seeing this. I mean, having, talked to you in the past about these moons, it really is a stunning color. How often do we get saturation of color like that? Like if people are watching this photo, it looks, not fully saturated, but it's very obvious that the moon is a different color. How will we see that no matter how much we can see?
Well, the clouds will make it a little bit tough because the moon actually gets quite a bit dimmer when we're in eclipse as well. So it's not just the color change, but the moon actually will fade away. And what's interesting is that we never know what the color is going to be like in advance. Each eclipse can be a little bit different. Sometimes you get that beautiful, the blood red moon. Sometimes it's more sort of a coppery color, a kind of orange color. We've had a couple of eclipses, especially back in the 80s, there was a volcanic eruption that put a lot of ash in the atmosphere of the Earth, and that made the moon actually turn almost completely black during the eclipse. There was just no light getting through to it. So everyone's a little bit different, and we'll have to see exactly what happens.
So tell us a little bit more about what makes this lunar eclipse so special and why it's called the blood moon. What's going on?
Well, yeah. So basically what happens during a lunar eclipse is, the moon is just a rock in space. It doesn't actually give off its own light. We only see it because the sun is shining on it. And so as it goes around the Earth, if things line up just right, it will actually go into the shadow that the Earth casts out into space. And then basically no sunlight can hit the moon directly. And so the moon should disappear. It turns out, though, that there's a little bit of light that still hits the moon during an eclipse. It's the light from all of the sunsets and all of the sunrises all around the world at that point. So that, that beautiful red color that we see from the sun during a sunset, that's the only light that can get to the moon during the total part of the eclipse. And so that's where the red color comes from. So as you can imagine, it depends if it's, what the weather is like all the way around the world. If there's like I mentioned, volcanic ash or things like that in the atmosphere, that can really change the colors.
What's up with the word worm in the title of this?
So the full moon in February in March is called the worm moon. Every full moon sort of has a name. We have harvest moon and the hunter's moon in the fall and things like that. This is the worm moon. And so the blood moon comes from the fact that it's a lunar eclipse, and the worm moon comes from the fact that it is in March, and so you put the two together and it's blood worm.
See, I made something up in my head about how the craters on the moon made it sort of look like worms, like had to tunnel through. I had a whole theory that was completely wrong.
Well, and that's okay. These names sometimes come to us from a long time ago, and we don't really know what they mean anymore, and we still use them anyway.
Yeah, but that's why you're here, to tell us what they mean. So last April, of course, we had the major eclipse across the country. Yeah. I mean, everybody leaning in across the world. Do you think that changed the public's interest in astronomy?
The eclipse last April and then the one back in 2017 really pushed astronomy into the forefront, I think. The idea that there's all this cool stuff going on in space and, rockets and landing on Mars and all those kinds of things. But here's something that I can see myself from my backyard or from a park or whatever. That's really turned it from a thing that you hear about to a thing that you do. And people have gotten really interested in actually doing astronomy. We get a lot of calls about, what's that star in the sky, or how can I learn more about the stars? The astronomy club here in town has been getting a lot more popular in terms of people coming out and things like that. So it's definitely, these kinds of events definitely drive public interest in astronomy. And that's great because there's always cool stuff going on there. And most of the time, most people just don't notice. Thank
you so much for being up early and telling us about, why you might be up late tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be a late night. Even if it's a little cloudy, we're going to stay up all the way through. So,
all right, take care.
You too. Bye.
That's Scott Young, planetarium astronomer at the Manitoba Museum. And so to see the bloodworm moon and the lunar eclipse, as he was saying at the beginning of that interview, 1:30 in the morning is probably about the best viewing time. 6:20 a.m. is the time right now on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being with us here on the program. Next, let's have a little bit of music from Juno Award winner Dan Mangan. His new album's called Natural Light, and it was created by Dan and his friends over 6 days in a cabin in the woods. This is the first single. It's Melody.
Melody chose me, and then Melody changed her mind. I should be over it now, but I ain't over it now. That's why I'd rather be lonely than be somebody's wasted time. I should be over it now, but I ain't over it now. They always gotta go when you want them to stay, so it's better not to love in case it's taken away. It's alright, it's fine, you will find in time. This is what they say to the ones that stay behind. Melody chose me, Melody changed her mind. I should be over it now, but I ain't over it now. That's why I'd rather be lonely than be somebody's wasting time. I should be over it now, but I ain't over it now. They always gotta go when you want them to stay, so it's better not to love in case it's taken away. And just when you think you got a foot in the door is a moment to see that she's not there anymore. So why Melody choose me if I'm not the choosing kind? Stop messing with my mind. I felt what it feels like to be chosen and then unchosen. They always gotta go when you want them to stay, so it's better not to love in case it's taken away. Just when you think you got some skin in the game, and just when you think the tides are turning your way, just when you think you got a bird in hand, it's a shakedown, broken to a shell of a man. So why Melody chose me? Oh, why Melody choose me? If I'm not the choosing kind, I'm messing with my mind.
Nice, saying a little melody about melody. Dan Mangan, that is new music from the Juno Award winner. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. Kevin and Chloe and Abby behind the glass today. Heather Wells in our news center. She's next here at 6:30. Right now it's 6:24. Let's turn to international news. U.S. President Donald Trump always boasted he could end Russia's war in Ukraine in a day. Well, his diplomacy is now being put to the test. His envoys are taking a U.S. ceasefire proposal endorsed by Ukraine to Moscow in an effort to get the Kremlin to buy in. For the latest, we're joined by Maria Popova, or full disclosure, we were joined by her right at 6 o'clock, so we just spoke with her. She is a professor in the Department of Political Science at McGill University.
Good morning.
So can you elaborate on this U.S. plan to sort of try to sell this ceasefire plan to Moscow? Because right now it seems they're not having it.
Indeed, the Russians are signaling that they will not accept this plan. It's a very simple plan. It simply says stop shooting for 30 days along the entire front line and stop lobbing missiles and start talking some sort of resolution. And right now, Russia is signaling that they will reject the ceasefire, and they're putting forth demands for the beginning that need to be met for the beginning of talks even.
What are the calculations that Putin is likely making as he's assessing, a deeper response to what the U.S. is trying to propose here?
So it's clear that what the Russian government is seeing is that, and we're all seeing, is that in the last month, the Trump administration has been very accommodating to Russia. They have basically signaled on behalf of Ukraine, over their heads, all sorts of concessions. No NATO for Ukraine, recognizing the occupied territories as Russian, etc. So, of course, Russia is emboldened by this. It sees that the Trump administration seems to be prioritizing resetting the Russo-American relationship to a friendly one instead of any interests and the security of Ukraine here. So that's why they're demanding so much, because they think they can get it.
And what leverage does the U.S. have, if any, with Russia? Has Trump overcalculated that?
I mean, the U.S. has a ton of leverage if they wanted to use it. If they wanted to pressure Russia, they could threaten to confiscate its frozen assets. That's about $300 billion. They could threaten to equip Ukraine with top-of-the-line weapons, something that the U.S. can do but has not done so far. They could threaten also to tighten sanctions significantly. The Russian economy is already struggling. So there's a lot that they can do, but we don't see any evidence from the Trump administration that they want to do any of that. Instead, what we're seeing is very friendly, accommodationist language. The Trump administration, Trump himself has said several times that he thinks that Putin wants peace, that he trusts Putin, that he doesn't think he would need to use any pressure. Well, it seems that this ceasefire will be rejected. So let's see how Trump reacts to that.
Any thoughts on how Trump may react to that? I mean, has his admiration for Putin, or his outward, I guess, expressed admiration for Putin, clouded his judgment in terms of, will he have seen this coming? I guess watching the politics will be very interesting.
Yeah, I don't expect him to lash out at Putin. We have not seen that at any point. We haven't seen this in his first term. We definitely haven't seen this since January. So what I'm expecting is for him to somehow blame Ukraine for Russia rejecting a ceasefire.
Remind us how much territory that Russia holds in Ukraine right now.
Russia holds about 20% of Ukrainian territory. But what's notable here is that this kind of accommodationist attitude towards Russia is not required by the realities on the front line. In other words, Russia is not advancing fast. It's in fact bogged down in eastern Ukraine. So there's no reason to be meeting Russian demands like this. This is entirely based on the Trump administration's priority to reset the Russian-American relationship and to end this war quickly, which I think he's finding out is not an easy thing to do.
Thank you very much for your analysis. Appreciate your time today.
Always a pleasure.
That's Maria Popova. We spoke with her at 6 o'clock about this. She's a professor in the Department of Political Science over at McGill University. You're with Information Radio on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube today. Wherever you're joining us, from. Thank you for joining us. Quick note here, programming note. I always like to mention where we're going to be for Communities in Focus. So next week, the morning show's live actually in Winkler and in Morden. So that is just the two locations where we're going to do our live shows. But that whole region, we're actually going to spend a full 2 weeks with a reporter and office hours and really focusing on that part of Manitoba for Communities in Focus. But our live shows are going to be Tuesday, Thursday, and we'll let you know our locations tomorrow once we firm everything up. And I just want to put that out there. Looking forward to going back to that part of the province. I started my radio career in the Southeast, working for that Golden West Broadcasting. They have a number of different stations in different towns and cities. So what a changing and growing place the Southeast of Manitoba always is. We have business news coming up, speaking of things that are changing. And we have a business story about HBC next in your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -2. Don't put that snowbrush away. A couple centimeters of snow on the way. Starting this morning, continuing through the afternoon. There is also a risk of freezing rain early this afternoon. A high today of 0. Manitoba's crusades to get machetes off the street has been joined by the world's biggest retailer. Walmart says it will no longer sell long-bladed weapons online or at any of its stores in Canada. The move comes after the province imposed strict rules on the sales of machetes used frequently in violent crimes over the past few years. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says Walmart decided it was best to simply pull machetes off its shelves.
It's cleaner to just stop the sales across the country. But it also shows that they're willing to understand the impact that these weapons are having on our streets, that these are used in violent attacks.
Earlier this week, Amazon announced it would no longer allow online sales of machetes to Manitoba addresses. An expert in finance says you are likely to see HBC stores closing in the near future. Canada's oldest retailer has filed for creditor protection. CBC asked the company what this could mean for Winnipeg's 2 remaining locations, but it says no decisions have been finalized. Chi Liao is an associate professor at the Asper School of Business. She says closures would make sense.
Immediately, you're going to have to close a large number of stores, have liquidation sales. If they can monetize any of the properties or the leases on the properties, that will help create liquidity.
Liao says an outdoor buyer could still come in and buy HBC and take it in a new direction. An affidavit says the Bay employs almost 200 people in Manitoba. With Canada's Mélanie Joly at the head of the table, the G7 foreign ministers are holding talks today outside Quebec City. Ukraine and Gaza are among topics on the official agenda. In the background, though, are issues like tariffs and Canadian sovereignty. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did not answer reporters yesterday when asked if Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada is on the agenda.
It is not a meeting about how we're going to take over Canada.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Joly says Rubio can expect to feel some heat from the United States' role in creating international trade turmoil. Now in Washington, a tariff meeting is set for today on Capitol Hill. Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Ontario Premier Doug Ford are holding talks with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Premier Ford says the goal is to establish a coherent plan for the tariff road ahead. Liberal leader Mark Carney will be sworn in as Prime Minister tomorrow morning. So will his new cabinet at a ceremony at Rideau Hall in Ottawa. CBC News has learned Carney's cabinet will be much smaller, perhaps just 15 to 20 ministers, down from Justin Trudeau's 37. But key members, including Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly, Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, and Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne, are expected to remain. Canada-U.S. relations will be a major focus for Carney's government. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 7. New legislation would ensure Manitobans can no longer be locked up just because they have a communicable illness. The new law would require all applications to detain people for public health reasons to be heard in an open court by a provincial court justice, and they could only be sent to a health facility, not a jail. Leif Jensen at the University of Manitoba's Community Law Centre represented a woman from God's Lake First Nation. She spent a month in jail last year to ensure she got her treatment for tuberculosis. He says the law is a step in the right direction.
When we're putting someone in detention, whether it's in a hospital or jail or even in their own home under what looks a lot like house arrest, having the maximum amount of procedural fairness is important, and a provincial court justice can provide that.
Health Minister Uzoma Asaguera says the practice of incarcerating people for health reasons is a shameful part of this province's history. After more than a month of waiting...
Do you want to build a snowman?
Sure do.
It doesn't have to be a snowman. Go away, Anna. Okay, bye.
Aww.
The cast of Rainbow Stage's production of Frozen have been chosen. 1,000 hopefuls auditioned, including 300 young people. 5 actresses were chosen to play Anna and Elsa. Carson Natras says with 5 months to go until the show starts, they've already sold a record amount of tickets, and he's not surprised.
It's not just kids for when the movie came out, it's adults from when the movie came out. It's kids who are discovering it just now. The story and the music resonates with people like it's been in our culture forever.
Frozen, the musical, will be center stage at Rainbow Stage starting August 7th until August 24th. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Yeah, it's going to be packed. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think I want to go.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will be singing along too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the audience, the open air theater. All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
I just want to mention something. Yesterday, Abby, we were talking about the 5-year, marking 5 years since the first COVID cases in Winnipeg, in Manitoba rather. Mm-hmm. And we asked people for their thoughts on how their lives had changed. And I just looked this morning, and we've got between 2 posts that I had up, one was all pictures, one was just asking the question. I mean, there's photos, there's memories, there's people's stories about their businesses and their lives, and also their relationships. There's a lot of calls to sort of still end division that is still out there. There's even some back and forth in those threads where you can see some of that division. So it's really interesting. And if you want to weigh in or you want to read, please do. Only one comment I'm going to read this morning is this one, and it comes from Tracy Mack with a photo. She said, we had to cancel plans with friends for a winter weekend at the lake during the pandemic. So she made these doppelgangers of them and set them up in multiple shots of what they would have been doing. So she's got this shot of this patio table at the lake, and then she's got these cardboard faces where she drew her friends' faces on them, and then she put jackets and fur hats on them, and they're sitting at the table with drinks, and they're here with them but not really there. I just think this is the funniest photo ever. Yeah, what a time we lived through. It's like a blur.
And another high point will be, couples and partners helping the others with a haircut.
Yes.
A lot of people help their partners with haircuts.
I was quite proud of what I did for Jean-Paul. I may have had one little miss where the clippers went zzz, and then it was like, oops, this piece looks really long.
It's fashion, my dear.
What did you do with your hair?
I think I just allowed it to grow then, and it went very long at that point, I remember.
We gotta look back.
It just went it was longer than this. It was fuller than this back then. I just allowed that fro blow.
Remember Corey Funk? Annika cut his hair, and we were like, oh.
Oh, yeah, Corey.
Everyone was judging everyone's spouses by their haircuts. All right. If you want to look back by that time, of course, there's some memories like that. There's also, of course, more serious things. But please have a look at that thread now that we've passed that anniversary. Significant milestone, to say the least. It is 22 minutes to 7 o'clock now. So Abby has our regional forecast.
Yeah, we're looking at the snowy, cloudy conditions across much of the province with a slight chance of a freezing rain in some areas. We're going to see temperatures that will come with that cold and wind chill in most of the regions in the northern part of the province. In Winnipeg right now, -2. It is cloudy out there. That snow should start sometime inside the 7 o'clock hour, and that will taper off this afternoon. We're going to be seeing a high of 0 today. As mentioned, there's a chance of freezing rain in the forecast with a chilly night ahead, with temperatures dropping to around -3 and then dropping further to -10. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region, -2 at this time, cloudy skies. There's a chance of snow turning to freezing rain also in the region. Heading west to Brandon, -3 now. We're already seeing the light snow in that part of the province. It's going to taper off around noon, then remains cloudy. A chance of freezing rain would trail that. We'll see highs near -4. In the Parkland region down in Dauphin, currently -9 at this time. Cloudy skies we're seeing. Expect a breezy day with light snow. Highs will be around -5. The Interlake region will see cloudy skies with light snow. Currently -8 in Gimli. The snow will taper off this afternoon with a high of -3. Then we're traveling to the Pa and Flin Flon right now, -25. Today will be mainly sunny. We'll see highs around -11, -12. However, the wind chill will feel like -30 this morning. Snow is expected to start later in the evening for folks in that part of the province. Traveling north, currently -30 in Thompson. Sunny skies ahead, though I expect a high of -13 today. The wind chill for this morning feels like -34. And then further north, similar conditions, but we see ice crystals in Churchill. Temperatures around -30 at this time. You warm up to around -18. However, the wind chill for folks in Churchill feels like -40. So there's a risk of frostbite. So from Winnipeg southwards, expect a mix of snow and freezing rain, with conditions all around coming with that. And then as you move north, you see temperatures dropping significantly. The wind chill is going to make you feel colder. We're seeing -38, -40s up north already. But for Winnipeg right now, we are at -2, warming up to 0. It's going to be slippery once that freezing rain starts.
Might already be slippery. Yeah, Chloe Friesen's in on the commute now.
Good morning. Yeah, on my way here, definitely had some moments where I was sliding a little bit further than I was comfortable with at some stop signs. So definitely give yourself a little bit of extra room there before you are stopping because of those fluctuating temperatures. We're so close to that freezing melting point. So do be careful out there. Of course, if you see something out on your commute, no matter how you get around, that is slowing you down, any stalls, any collisions, or maybe something on one of the active transportation routes, we would love to hear from you. You can call our commuter line at 204-788-3093.
We're still in the hair beat around the pandemic. You changed your hair too, right?
I did the extreme.
Okay.
I used to have long hair. During the pandemic, I shaved it all off.
Yeah, you shaved. I remember you buzzing your head.
I bought clippers. They were mailed to my home. I put my hair in ponytails, chopped them off, and then buzzed it. And it was probably the easiest way to just deal with my hair at the time.
I did the opposite. That's when I haven't colored my hair now. This is all just my hair.
Yeah.
The coloring all grew out, and then the length. I just let it go that way.
I had always wanted to do it. Yeah. So the pandemic seemed like a perfect point that if it didn't work out, not too many people were going to see me and I could grow it out a little bit. So I think it worked out.
It did work out. Yeah, I like your hair short. It is 6:42 a.m. right now. Let's talk business news. Crystal Ramakan's here. We're just reminiscing, Crystal, because yesterday, we're doing this serious conversations and also just the things that we all, did, like our own hair. It was 5 years since the first cases in Manitoba. So that's what's got us talking about this. You are here to talk about business news, and actually you're starting with a Swedish electric vehicle battery maker. They're called Northvolt, and I understand they filed for bankruptcy, and we could actually see ramifications in Canada. Why is that?
Yeah, that's right. So the battery manufacturer had plans to build a $7 billion factory here in Canada, in Quebec. So there are concerns about the future of that plant now. So the company says it made an exhaustive effort to explore all available means to secure a viable financial and operational future for the company, but it's faced rising capital costs, geopolitical instability, supply chain disruptions, and shifts in market demand. Now, the company says its North American operations are solvent, and it says it intends to honor its obligations and meet its financial commitments. But the mayor of the city, where the work was already underway, remains hopeful but unconvinced the project will be completed. So a court-appointed trustee will determine the future of the business's assets, including production facilities. And it's not immediately clear how the how the bankruptcy will affect the future of the EV battery plant that's being built on Montreal's South Shore. Now, a lot of government money was committed to this project. So in 2023, the Quebec government pledged $2.9 billion in financing to secure this deal. The federal government committed up to $1.34 billion to build the plant, and another $3 billion in other incentives. And so far, the province has invested $270 million, and the provincial pension investor there has also put in $200 million. But you know what? There is some hope. The Swedish government has indicated it could step in to support the company.
It's a lot of money put forward, yeah. And you can understand why when you think about what the tech is. Let's go to another story. Speaking of money, the Bank of Canada lowered its key interest rate to 2.75%. How are the markets reacting right now?
Yeah, so Canada's main stock index rose yesterday while U.S. markets were mixed after 25% tariffs on U.S. imports of steel and aluminum officially kicked in. So Canada also announced a second round of retaliatory tariffs. And Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem says the uncertainty caused by tariffs has shaken business and consumer confidence. And he says tariffs could cause severe economic damage the longer they are in place. So as we've been talking about a lot, markets have been zigzagging for the past week and a half amid daily, even hourly updates on the U.S.'s trade war with Canada. But the S&P TSX was up 175 points yesterday, and that strength was led by energy and technology stocks. Now, the latest data on U.S. inflation also came out yesterday, showing prices had cooled more than expected. And that gives the central bank in the U.S. a little more wiggle room for its upcoming interest rate decisions. So the U.S. Federal Reserve is not expected to cut its key rate at its next meeting. But in the past few weeks, market expectations for how many times it will cut this year have risen amid the uncertainty posed by tariffs. But we have to remember the most recent inflation data that we're talking about here is from before the U.S. began levying tariffs.
Yeah, so it's next month and then weeks ahead. We're really going to see the impact, right? Mm-hmm. Finally, before we do look at the numbers in more detail today, how is Meta reacting to this new tell-all book about the company?
Yes. So the parent company of Facebook and Instagram has gone to an arbitrator to stop the promotion of this new memoir by a former staffer that paints the social media company in an unflattering light. So an emergency arbitrator has ruled that Sarah Wynne Williams is prohibited from promoting her book, Careless People, which was released earlier this week. So it chronicles her tenure at Facebook from 2011 to 2017. And during that time, she became a high-level employee who interacted with CEO Mark Zuckerberg, then COO Sheryl Sandberg, and Joel Kaplan, the company's current policy chief. Now, the book claims the company built tools that would censor content to appease the Chinese Communist Party during its attempts to enter the Chinese market. But a Meta spokesperson says the book is a mix of out-of-date and previously reported claims about the company and false accusations about executives. And the company has previously said Wynne Williams was fired for poor performance and toxic behavior. And Meta alleges she violated the non-disparagement terms of her severance agreement, resulting in the company filing this emergency motion.
What is going on with the rest of the numbers then?
So right now in Europe, markets opened in negative territory, but right now Germany, the UK, and France are all still up. In Asia, stocks are falling, so Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is down 23 cents to 67.46 US per barrel. Gold is up $13.90 to $2,947.80 US per ounce, and the dollar is down 0.03 of a cent to 69.6 cents US.
All right, Crystal Ramlakan, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Every morning, Crystal is on with our business news on CBC. You're listening to Information Radio.
Spike in excitement comes to Brandon, and CBC will be there. The 2025 U Sports Men's Volleyball National Championship, March 21st to 23rd. Proudly sponsored by CBC and streaming on CBC Gem. Cheer on the best teams in Canada as they battle it out for the big prize. And visit us at the CBC booth Saturday. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
Winkler and Morden, let's talk. CBC wants to get to know you a little bit better. I'm Rosanna Hempel. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to Winkler and Morden March 17th to 21st. What do you want us to know about your communities? What stories are we missing? I can't wait to meet you. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
All right. In fact, our colleague Corey Funk, who is normally on the morning show, is in Winkler Morden area today. He's just doing some equipment checking, and he's going to be talking to some folks and starting to gather some stories. For our portion of Communities in Focus, Information Radio will be live next week on Tuesday in Morden, and I'll confirm our location tomorrow here. I have a good idea, but Corey's just going to check it out today. We have confirmed, though, that on Thursday, March 20th next week, we will be in Winkler. So we're Morden Tuesday, Winkler Thursday. Next Thursday in Winkler, we're going to be at the Triangle Oasis Restaurant, which is at 880 Tripoli Boulevard in Winkler. So that's where we're going to be, broadcasting live. And maybe you'll be there as well with your stories or comments or feedback for us. We'd love to hear more about your community and growth. And obviously, all of these Communities in Focus trips start with meeting with community and listening to begin with what we need to, what you would like us to share about your community. So we've had some pre-meetings already, and it's just astonishing the growth in that part of the province. I did a trip and a focus tour to Winkler actually some years ago. And at that time, I remember being in the school and we were doing immigration stories. So it's really interesting that all these years later, it still is a hub of growth in Manitoba in that part of the province for business growth and for manufacturing, which is obviously hugely relevant around the tariff questions, and for immigration as well. So we're coming to listen. That's next week. On Information Radio with 2 live shows. It is 9 minutes now to 7 o'clock, -2 in Winnipeg, mostly cloudy. And next on the show, let's talk tariffs, as we have been most mornings. There's a high-stakes meeting happening in Washington today. Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc will sit down with the United States Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick to talk trade. This meeting came after the escalation of the U.S.-Canada trade war earlier this week. You might know that at one point the U.S. was threatening 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum coming from Canada. And then Premier Doug Ford threatened to cut off electricity to some U.S. states. And then they pulled back. The states did and said, look, we won't do 50%, we'll do 25%. Let's talk about this meeting today, though. Jonathan Malloy's with us, professor of political science at Carleton University. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you make of Ford's strategy to be this direct and this tough?
Well, I think it's been effective in the short term. We know that the Trump administration doesn't respond very well when you're just trying to be nice or try and make logical fact-based arguments. You have to break through somehow. And I think Mr. Ford, both through the electricity surcharges and also, as he said, all his media appearances, managed to break through. He does seem to have a knack for communicating with Americans. So the strategy has certainly worked, at least in the short term. We'll have to see what happens from here.
How risky is the strategy, given that, you're actually threatening to take people's electricity away? You're threatening the people of the United States.
Well, who knows? But this is how you do business with the Trump administration. They said it's not through being nice. It's not through sort of rational, fact-based legal arguments. It seems to be that, to be frank, Mr. Trump only as a bully only responds to other bullies. He's certainly been bullying Canada, and I guess we have to push back against him a bit, even though that's a very risky strategy. But he doesn't leave a lot of other options.
It's interesting because later this morning I'm having a conversation with our Premier Wab Canoe, and his strategy seems to have been a little bit different. He's adopted the that quote unquote elbows up idea, but he's also get tough if we have to, as he's put it. But he also has said he's leaning into the friendly. He's sort of leaning into the cheeky, even as he's signing orders to have U.S. booze, for example, off the shelves here. So I'm going to talk to him about the strategies and where that line is when you might shift. Do you think the Ontario Premier Doug Ford's strategy and Dominic LeBlanc, how coordinated do you think this was with the federal government, Ford coming out and making this, saying we're going to cut off electricity?
Well, it's hard to know if it was coordinated at all. It's certainly complementary. Mr. Ford is, basically on side with the federal government here. The federal government, of course, is announcing its own big counter tariffs, so there's nothing really contradictory there. Mr. Ford does appear to be sort of operating on his own. As you said, different provinces and different premiers are having different approaches. Mr. Ford is sort of the most, I think, in line with the federal government. As you said, Mr. Canoe is a different approach. Daniel Smith in Alberta certainly is skeptical of counter tariffs. So, of all the premiers, Mr. Ford is probably most in line with the federal government. But I said, I think he's operating on his own, but parallel with the feds.
What do you think is going to come out of this meeting today?
Well, I obviously have no idea, but I think the hope, the best case scenario, is to start moving the conversation from incoherence to coherence, to move it from these random tariffs and the president sort of saying they're on, they're off, back and forth, to move to a negotiation. The free trade agreement is scheduled to be renegotiated anyways, and I think the hope would be that we can at least move the administration to having a conversation about the new rules of the agreement. Mr. Trump clearly doesn't like the existing rules; he completely ignores them. Well, let's have a negotiation about what the new rules should be, and that's going to be a very tough negotiation. I mean, they're not going to stop this very aggressive approach, but if we could at least have some coherence, I think for Canadian businesses, that's what they really want at this point. It's just some coherence rather than sort of on-off approach to things there. So that's the big hope. But I don't think it's going to be accomplished today, but this could be the first step towards that.
I want to ask you about the possible benefits and risks of meeting when the U.S. has been, as you've been alluding to, ignoring our existing trade agreement, but also threatening our sovereignty. I mean, even in the language Marco Rubio was using to talk about the G7, when he was asked about if annexation will be discussed, he said we will not be talking about how the U.S. will take over Canada. I mean, even the way that was framed, I think, has a lot of Canadians on edge, potentially here. Is there a risk in even having this meeting in person?
Well, I don't think at this point it's much of a risk because, as you said, the threat is so dire. And I mean, I guess you could say we're kind of going to the lion's den here. But, it's clear that being nice to the Trump administration accomplishes nothing. Fact-based arguments accomplishes nothing. So getting their attention and bullying back is the one thing that seems to work. And as said, it's certainly Canada does seem to be facing an existential threat. Does Mr. Rubio necessarily believe this? I don't know. But Mr. Rubio knows that he can't contradict his own president. So, I think at this point, we got this meeting through strength, through Mr. Ford threatening the electricity surcharges, and we'll see what goes from there. So I think there's low risk at this point in this meeting because nothing else has worked.
We'll leave it there this morning, Jonathan Malloy, and I guess we'll see what's going to come next, given that tomorrow Mark Carney's going to be sworn in. So that's another thing that's going to change things. Appreciate having you on this morning.
Well, thank you.
That's Jonathan Malloy, a professor in the Department of Political Science at Carleton University. So Mark Carney, the Prime Minister designate, will be sworn in tomorrow with Cabinet, and we'll hear more details on that on World Report, which is coming up at 3 minutes' time. It's 3 minutes to 7 o'clock right now on CBC. First, though, let's go to Heather Welsh. She has the latest on our Manitoba news stories and developments with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, after pleas from the Manitoba government, Walmart is pulling machetes from its website and from stores across Canada. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says they understand the impact these weapons have on our streets. Earlier this week, Amazon announced it would no longer allow online sales of machetes to Manitoba addresses. The cast has been chosen.
Do you want to build a snowman?
1,000 hopefuls auditioning for Rainbow Stage's August production of Frozen, including 300 young people. We're going to hear from some of them coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's go to the commute actually next, and then we'll dip into our weather forecast. Chloe Friesen's filling in today for Corey Funk.
Hello. I got a call on the commuter line from Thomas, who is traveling on Highway 16 just between Russell, Foxwarren, and Minnedosa. He mentioned that there is light snow on Highway 16. Right now, it's melty. There's a few slick spots, so if that temperature does get lower, you could have some icy conditions on Highway 16. So do watch out for that. And thank you, Thomas, for the call. 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Chloe. Well, that temperature may be lower. It's right around 0. That's the problem, right? So -2 and mostly cloudy in Winnipeg. Brandon's light snow -3. -3. Much colder up north. Thompson's -32. For Winnipeg today, snow starting this morning. And then our high is going to be, as I said, right around 0, which always makes it challenging. So thanks for the call. Please call the commuter line through the morning as your conditions change and shift. In the next hour of Information Radio, right after 7, the family of a Winnipeg woman who died after waiting for heart surgery is calling for more transparency from the healthcare system. We'll hear more about their mother's experience and a new law proposed in her honor. We're also going to hear a comment and response from the health minister in Manitoba. Also in the next hour of the show, curly locks from sheep are the foundation for making felted fabric. We're going to go to a fashion exhibit that puts a spotlight on wool in its many forms. And then at 10 to 8, after years in business, Canada's oldest retailer, as Heather's been mentioning in the news, is contemplating its future. So the Bay may need to shut down half of its stores across the country. We, though, are going to have a full interview on the program about what led to this moment. So stay tuned. We're going to have a little bit of a dig into that. That's coming up just before 8. Stay tuned. World Report's next. It's 1 minute to 7 right now.
Today on The Current.
Tuberculosis is a disease that has used structures of injustice that we blazed for it to travel through the human world.
John Green had a massive bestseller with his novel The Fault in Our Stars. He's now using his fame to shine a light on how tuberculosis is affecting the lives of people around the world. John Green on how tuberculosis is everything, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Today's G7 talks could be uncomfortable for U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He's meeting with the other G7 foreign ministers in Charleroi near Quebec City. The summit comes at a time of global turmoil, a lot of it caused by the Trump administration, including tariffs and controversial initiatives in Ukraine and Gaza. As Kate McKenna tells us, some of those tense issues are on the meeting agenda.
Secretary Rubio, do you support annexing Canada?
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio didn't answer reporters when he pulled up to the hotel where he's meeting with other G7 foreign ministers. Discussing Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada isn't on the agenda. And earlier yesterday, he said he has no plans to bring it up.
It is not a meeting about how we're going to take over Canada.
During their meetings, foreign ministers are set to focus on issues like the situation in the Middle East, ongoing support for Ukraine, and crises in Venezuela and Haiti.
I'll be meeting with Secretary Rubio. I will also be meeting with my European and British counterparts.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says Rubio can expect to feel some heat for the United States' role in creating international trade turmoil, following its move to slap global tariffs on steel and aluminum.
In every single meeting, I will raise the issue of tariffs to coordinate our response with the Europeans and to put pressure on the Americans.
Rubio and Joly are set to meet privately this morning. They've been in regular contact since before Trump took office in January. But Canada has the G7 presidency this year, meaning this time they'll be meeting on her turf. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Lamalbaie, Quebec.
Canadian and American officials are meeting in Washington today, hoping to lower the temperature of the trade war. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is hosting Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne, and Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, along with Ambassador Kirsten Hillman. LeBlanc says he's hoping to forge a smoother trade relationship.
The ultimate landing spot is to lift the tariffs that have applied to the Canadian economy and our retaliatory measures that apply to the American economy, and try and have that more concerted conversation, including with our Mexican partners. That's, we think, where these issues can properly be sorted out.
Yesterday, Ottawa rolled out close to $30 billion worth of retaliatory measures in response to Washington's steel and aluminum tariffs imposed on Canada. Many Canadian veterans say they're feeling betrayed by the new U.S. administration. After fighting alongside American troops in Afghanistan, they say it hurts to see President Donald Trump threaten Canada's sovereignty and withdraw support for Ukraine. And they're making their feelings known online. Murray Brewster reports.
Canada should honestly become our 51st state.
President Donald Trump's trolling gets under the skin of Canadian veterans. But it was the bullying of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that prompted the online meme that said, We went because you were attacked. We didn't ask for your thanks. Neither did 158 of us who died for you. Wednesday marks the 11th anniversary of Canada's military withdrawal from Afghanistan, a war many Canadian soldiers feel was fought to help defend the United States.
If 9/11 were to happen again, I honestly don't think I would be as willing or ready to help the Americans.
Retired Corporal Bruce Moncourt was wounded in Kandahar in a friendly fire incident that involved an American warplane. He says he simply can't believe Americans have elected a president that, in his words, is so dumb. Other former soldiers are quick to make the distinction between the Trump administration and the U.S. military.
It's not about the United States Army or the United States Armed Forces. It's about the President of the United States.
Retired Major General Dennis Thompson commanded Canadian and American troops in Kandahar and says he stays in touch with many of them.
In many cases, they're ashamed. They cannot believe what their president is saying. None of them can accept that Russia is the United States' friend. It's just, for them, it just gobsmacks them that he speaks this way.
Canada fought alongside the U.S. in Afghanistan for more than 12 years, at a cost of 158 dead and 2,000 wounded. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Kremlin is claiming Russia's operation to push Ukrainian forces from Kursk is now in the final stage. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited the region yesterday. It was his first trip there since Ukrainian forces seized territory in Kursk. In televised images, Putin, dressed in a military uniform, is shown speaking with his senior commanders. He tells them Russian forces should completely liberate Kursk as soon as possible. The war between Russia and Ukraine could soon pause. Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day truce. It's now up to Russia to sign off on a ceasefire. A new UN report is accusing Israel of genocidal acts against Palestinians. It says Israeli forces systematically destroyed women's health care facilities and used sexual violence as a war strategy during the conflict in Gaza. Israel says the report is unfounded, biased, and lacks credibility. This against the backdrop of an Israeli blockade now in its 12th day, stopping all aid from entering Gaza. Crystal Gamansing is watching that part of the story.
Children, women, men gesture with their arms high, desperately hoping their call for bread will be heard. This is how it is every day, says Akram Barba. With the closure of the crossing, it will only get worse. Those still making bread are charging a premium, and few have money. At the start of the month, Israel halted all shipments into Gaza. Then on Sunday, cut electricity to a plant that supplied clean drinking water to roughly 500,000 people. Israel's prime minister and energy minister have said they are using all measures available to pressure Hamas into releasing the remaining hostages. But roughly 50 hostage families have filed a petition at the High Court. They want the power turned back on, fearing it puts those in captivity at greater risk of abuse or death. 24 are believed to still be alive, including an Israeli American.
We talk about everything. Israel has been under siege, as you
Speaking from the Oval Office Wednesday with the Irish Prime Minister by his side, President Donald Trump said the U.S. is working hard to resolve the problem. In response to a question, the president also appears to have reversed course on his own Gaza rebuilding plan.
Nobody's expelling any Palestinians. I don't know. Who are you with?
Before anything can be rebuilt, peace is needed. For now, all sides appear to be willing at least to stay at the table and keep talking. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Executives at a major energy conference in Houston say they're seeing huge growth in demand for natural gas. The commodity hasn't always been popular with environmentalists, but as the CBC's Paula Duhatschek explains, businesses and political leaders are banking on it as a stable source of power.
Data centers and AI are energy hogs.
Meg O'Neill is CEO of the Australian oil and gas company Woodside Energy. She says industry is looking for massive amounts of energy to power all those data centers. While tech giants are also interested in renewables, O'Neill says natural gas will play a key role as a source of stable baseload power.
That's underpinned our thesis that LNG demand will continue to grow.
Analytics firm S&P Global says the world world's appetite for liquefied natural gas, or LNG, will grow 40% in the next 5 years.
We're expecting a strong demand growth for power.
Tatsuya Terazawa is with the Institute of Energy Economics Japan, a think tank based in Tokyo. He says that country is looking to buy LNG and eyeing Canada as a source of supply.
Especially LNG with a shorter distance from British Columbia to Japan, which is beneficial to us.
Still, some environmentalists say despite the optimism, industry needs to proceed with caution.
That's our message here at this conference.
Dan Grossman is a vice president with the U.S.-based Environmental Defense Fund.
That means using gas in a way where you manage those methane emissions and you're keeping the climate impact to a manageable level.
LNG Canada, the country's first large-scale liquefied natural gas export facility, is expected to start shipping later this year. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Houston, Texas.
And finally, there are bound to be some magic moments when Toronto hosts the first FIFA World Cup game on Canadian soil.
Vamos, vamos, dejemos todo en la cancha, con corazón.
This group of Ontario musicians hopes they'll get their big break during the tournament. Now, it's not until June 2026, but a group of artists from the London area are building up the hype. They collaborated on this song called Beautiful Game. Their ultimate goal is for it to be the official theme song of the 2026 World Cup. They made a music video, which you can watch at cbc.ca.
The people all screaming go. We all in pursuit of the goal. You know.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Are you pumped up? I like a good anthem myself. Let's get into what's happening this hour in Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. That is where we are sitting, right in the middle of downtown Winnipeg with Information Radio. You're listening to CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. This hour on the program, we have more on a story that started developing in the news yesterday. The family of a Winnipeg woman who died after waiting for heart surgery is calling for more transparency from the healthcare system. We will hear more, as I mentioned, about their mother's experience and a new proposed law in her honor. And we also are going to hear from the health minister in response this half hour on the program. In addition to a story from our community reporter, Shanley Vidal, we're going to meet two wool artists who have interlocked their styles for an exhibit coming up where farm meets future. Stay tuned. That's all still ahead and more on Information Radio. Right now to Heather Wells with other news stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's crusade to get machetes off the street has been joined now by the world's biggest retailer. Walmart says it will no longer sell long-bladed weapons online or at any of its stores in Canada. This after the province imposed strict rules on the sales of machetes used frequently in violent crimes over the past few years. If you shop at HBC, you may not be doing it much longer. An expert in finance says you are likely to see HBC stores closing in the near future after Canada's oldest retailer filed for creditor protection. We're going to hear from an expert at the Asper School of Business who says department stores historically cater to the middle class, but as the middle class declines, department stores are being replaced by other stores like Dollarama. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
So, Heather, it's really interesting here because just before we turn to weather traffic, Chloe Friesen, who's directing the show this morning, I'm going to pull Chloe in because she's in studio. We were talking about this morning, and my initial reaction, just personally speaking, was, I had a reaction because I feel like, when Eaton's closed and now if the Bay closes, like that department store sort of thing. How about for yourself? Like when you think about over the years where you would have shopped?
Yeah, I mean, there are fewer stores like that to go to. I don't know where you go to get that same kind of broad selection, right? And sometimes there are maybe higher priced items than you would see, well, for sure at a Dollarama. But yeah, it could speak to that. It could speak to the age difference as well.
Well, so let's turn to Chloe for that, because I mean, I'm 51. Chloe, you are
27.
Okay, and you said, oh yeah, the Bay. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, this morning you were mentioning, oh no, the Bay's closing, and my first thought was, and I apologize for this, people still shop at the Bay?
Yeah, no, it's no apology. There's just a reflections as people who shop.
Yeah, so that it is interesting, the generational differences, because I rarely go to the mall these days.
Mm-hmm.
A department store is. I can't remember the last time that I went to a department store. It's just not kind of in the retail spaces that I go to.
Yeah. Abby's weighing in here now too. Everybody seems to have a thought on this.
I'm a debate person also. Most of the time you find me just wandering around in there looking for something.
So you're a department store shopper
I'm a
as well,
department
you would say,
store
overall?
person. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think we should throw this to the audience, right? Like just in terms of shopping habits, especially against what Heather, you said, which I find very interesting, because the retail analysts are the ones that know, and they're talking about, I think as you worded it, the change in the shrinking middle class, right?
Yeah, the socioeconomic impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you have thoughts on this, you can weigh in on our listener line, 788-3205, 788-3205. And we have a full interview actually coming up on this as well. So that's just before 8 o'clock. Right now, you heard Abby here, and we do have to get to weather because things are going to shift today in the forecast.
Yeah, across the regions, we're looking at a cold, cloudy, snow and freezing rain in the forecast with some light breeze, particularly down in the south. Now, as you head north, you're going to see much colder conditions with the wind chill. Thompson and Churchill actually at minus 30 at this time, and the wind chill feeling close to minus 40, minus 41. So it's pretty brutal up there. But looking at conditions down south, Winnipeg at this point in the city, we are at minus 2. The snow should be starting anytime now. It's going to make its appearance. It won't be sticking around for too long. It tapers off as we get into the afternoon. And now there's a slight chance of freezing rain coming on the heels of that. So you need to watch your step. Once the system moves out, we should see about 2 centimeters of snow on the ground. Then it gets breezy. We'll warm up to about 0 later today. Tonight, the clouds would step back a bit. For those sky gazers, you might get to see some moon action.
The lunar eclipse.
You might get to see that before the clouds would roll back in, but it's a good night to watch. And then tomorrow, a mix of sun and clouds. But for today, it's a snowy morning that should be clearing up in the afternoon, and some slippery spots will be spotted all through the day.
Chloe, you got calls about the snow already, right?
Yeah. With this weather that's so close to zero, and then we've got some precipitation, it is causing some slippery conditions. I know here in the city, but also on the highways. I got a call from Thomas, who was traveling on Highway 16, and just between Russell and Foxwarren to Minnedosa, a few slick spots there with snow on the highway. So as those temperatures are in that sweet spot kind of freezing thawing, you do want to be careful on the highways especially. Also, give yourself a little extra time to stop. I know it's a bit slick out there here in the city of Winnipeg. If you have anything to add, or if you spot something that is slowing you down, getting in your way, let us know. Call our commuter line at 204-788-3093.
So let's get into the details of this medical story that started to develop yesterday. A Winnipeg family does say that doctors owe it to patients to inform them, in their view, if they can't provide life-saving treatment in time. Debbie Fuster died in October 2024 after waiting more than a month for urgent heart surgery. She was 69. Two of Debbie's children, Daniel Fuster and Colleen Dick, spoke about their mother at a media event yesterday. It was put on by secondstreet.org. Now, that's a public policy think tank that advocates for private options in healthcare. This is some of what Daniel and Colleen said.
It all started in July 2024. I remember Mom contacting us saying her family doctor was worried about her heart. They scheduled a stress test for August 1st, and I could see her trying to stay strong for us, doing her best to hold it together, even though she was scared. August 1st came. My sister Colleen took her in for that stress test in the morning. She lasted just 3 minutes on the incline before they stopped it. They had all the information they needed. The results were so serious, they called her back that night. I drove her myself, and we sat with the doctor as he laid it out. This was urgent. She texted us kids that day. Stress test today lasted 3 minutes on the incline. They got results, so came back tonight to talk with doctor. They fast-tracked me as this is urgent. My original consult was December 6th. I expect to be in St. Boniface in the next 2 weeks for a catheter scan and dye injection to find the blockage. They told her she would need heart surgery within 3 weeks. The specialist fast-tracked an echocardiogram and prescribed anti-heart attack and stroke meds to tide her over. That's when it hit me how serious this was. My mom put on a brave face, and we trusted the healthcare system to step up. By August 12th, we had a date. She texted us, "Okay, I have an appointment at St. Boniface on August 22nd at 6:30 a.m. Echocardiogram. Whoever takes me might have to stick around for a while. I'll check that and stay with me overnight." She was already figuring out who'd be with her, keeping us in the loop. On August 22nd, she got that echocardiogram. The results were crushing, to say the least. Extreme blockages. The doctors said she would need a triple bypass, a surgery her brother had received 20 years earlier, and who was still alive today because of it. Up until then, they had moved fast. They acted like they knew her life was on the line, and we trusted that they'd keep that pace. But after that, everything slowed down. On September 4th, my mom contacted us after talking to a pre-op nurse at St. Boniface. She texted us, "Today I talked with a pre-op nurse at the hospital. I won't likely be getting surgery in September. They're catching up from summer now. I will know the week previous of my surgery date." She told me in person the nurse blamed summer holidays for the delay. The doctors had hinted at a late September date, but now it was October, maybe. I could see her trying to stay hopeful. We were trying to stay hopeful, and we trusted the healthcare system would come through. September passed, October came, and we still waited for that call. They'd promised she'd know a week before surgery, but the phone stayed silent. I kept checking in, "Mom, anything yet?" But there was nothing. They'd said mid-October, but there was no update, no plan, just silence. Then on October 13th, 2024, after a Thanksgiving dinner with our family, she was gone. My mom passed away before the surgery ever happened. And I can't describe the shock, the anger, and the grief. Our family has been devastated. The only thing we've heard from the health authorities since is we got a bill for the ambulance that came that night. Not a word of explanation, not a call to say they're sorry. Nothing about why they couldn't help her, even though they knew it was urgent. My mom really was entering a sweet time in her life. She was settling into retirement nicely. She was making plans to see her grandkids regularly across the country. She was actively involved in relief work and disaster cleanup locally and abroad. My mother served her community relentlessly with fervor and joy. The hole that she left is immense. My mom paid into the healthcare system her whole life, and when she needed them, they weren't there. There's no refund, there's no money back guarantee. They didn't even offer alternatives. Nothing to bridge the gap when they knew they couldn't respond in time. We are left with the devastating loss of our mother, our rock.
Hello, everyone. My name is Colleen Dick. I'm Debbie's daughter. When we were first approached to lend our mother's name to this initiative, my immediate instinct was, of course. It seemed so obvious this was something we would be honored to have as part of her legacy. But almost as quickly as that instinct came, so did a sense of trepidation. I took a pause. The phrase unintended consequences echoed in my mind as I thought more deeply about what this meant, not just for us, but for the patient experience in our healthcare system. The last thing we wanted was to attach her mother's name to something that might cause harm rather than good. So we asked questions. We talked to trusted friends, family, members of the community, people who work in the healthcare system, and what we learned was eye-opening. There is a desperate need for radical honesty in our healthcare system. We heard the stories, heartbreaking ones, and we heard, if you need care, you have to go to the emergency room, refuse to leave. Once they admit you, by law, they can't send you home until you're dealt with. We heard, "My doctor told me to sit in emergency day after day until I was seen. You have to be loud. You have to demand attention." People know the system's broken. Patients are told to work the system, to exploit legal loopholes, to use liability laws as leverage, to fight, to push, to hack their way in. Because in many cases, that's the only way to be seen. When we heard this, we felt sick. This isn't a witch hunt. Our mother's doctors did everything right. They expedited her care, and the system failed. Mom was not a squeaky wheel. She'd been through the system before when she battled breast cancer years ago. She was patient, she trusted the process, she didn't want to cut in line or get in the way of anyone else's care. But now we understand that the reality is different. Didn't you know? You should have just been the squeaky wheel, is what we kept hearing. We didn't realize that we were expected to fight and manipulate the system just to get the care she deserved. Debbie's law won't fix everything, but it will introduce something that is desperately needed, and that's radical honesty.
So that was Colleen Dick speaking at a media event yesterday before her Daniel Fuster. Their mother, Debbie Fuster, died in October while waiting for urgent heart surgery. She was 69. So you heard the mention of Debbie's law there. Debbie's family and secondstreet.org are proposing this. It would require, they say, patients waiting for surgery to be informed if life-saving treatment cannot be provided within the recommended time. They also want Manitoba to do a better job of tracking people who die while on the waiting list. In an hour from now, we will ask the Premier for his thoughts on this because that's one of the questions in our monthly interview. Meantime, Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera was asked about what happened to Debbie Fuster.
First, I'd like to extend my condolences to Debbie's family and her community. It's a tragic loss for them, and certainly recognize that anyone who passes away while waiting for any kind of care, that is a significant loss and not something that we want to see happening. I certainly am very open to looking at what the proposed law is, and I'm very open to always hearing ideas from Manitobans about how we can make healthcare stronger. I do want to be very clear that here in Manitoba, if you're someone who has an urgent or life-threatening health condition and you need life-saving care or critical intervention, you are going to get that care. Our protocols prioritize people who have urgent and life-threatening cardiac needs, and they get the care that they need here in Manitoba, and that's going to continue to be the practice. I also do think it's important to note that here in Manitoba at St. Boniface Hospital, we had what was the Cardiac Center of Excellence. We had a cardiac program here that was the envy not only nationally but internationally. And the previous government, to this day, no one understands why, dismantled that Cardiac Center of Excellence. They broke that program apart. No one knows why. But what I can tell you is that our government has been meeting with the experts at St. Boniface Hospital who were foundational to that program, that Cardiac Center of Excellence, and we're doing the work of restoring it and making sure that in Manitoba we again have a Cardiac Center of Excellence in our province. That's Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera. If you want to read more on the story, cbc.ca/Manitoba. As I mentioned, the Premier's here in an hour from now. You're on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We are live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, and it is time for morning sports. Paul McGowan continues to fill in for Scott Reguer this week. Hi again, Paul.
Hi, Marcy.
So why don't we start with basketball this morning? The Raptors won again last night.
Yeah, and they've now won 5 of their last 6, which is maybe, definitely not what fans want. And with that in mind, last night was setting up perfectly. They had just one regular in the lineup. I could list all of the Raptors who were not playing yesterday, but it is easier to tell you that center Jakob Poeltl was really the only name, starter or bench player that a casual fan might recognize. And yet, the Raptors win by 13 over the Sixers. Coach Darko Rajakovic very impressed by all the reinforcements.
It is very special. It just shows such a great job that the front office is doing of bringing those guys on. And, our 9-5, bringing guys there, getting them incorporated in the system. And then you see those guys step on the floor and contribute to that. Well, it's special.
And with the win, the Raptors are still 4.5 games Kings back of a play-in spot. They also pass the Sixers and Nets and make their draft lottery prospects worse. So a team very much in no man's land, even if they are fun to watch right now.
Let's stick with basketball. The National University Championships are happening right now in Vancouver.
Both the men's and women's championships, which is the first time that both tournaments are taking place side by side. Now for the home squad, the UBC Thunderbirds, it is a rare opportunity to win a championship in front of a home crowd, and that would be especially meaningful for the UBC men. They have been to multiple finals, but have not won a title in more than 50 years. With that in mind, their head coach reached out to a former NBA All-Star to ask for some words of encouragement.
UBC Thunderbirds, I heard you guys are going to the championship. I just want to say congratulations and good luck. Say good luck to UBC Thunderbirds. Go UBC! Good luck, Thunderbirds! That's a Thunderbird sound. Good luck.
That, of course, is printer salesman and muscle relief cream spokesperson Shaquille O'Neal. Also won some NBA championships in there. All that U Sports Championship action begins today. The men at 1 o'clock, the women a little bit later, all of it available on CBC Gem.
Oh, athletes always attached to those products. George Foreman, a boxer, and grills, right? Ink and Shaq.
Exactly.
Finally, we have a scandal to talk about actually in ski jumping this morning.
Yeah, I don't like cheating in sports, but if you are going to cheat, you can at least follow the example of the Norwegian ski jump team and cheat in a way that lends itself to continued ridicule. That team caught this week adding to the crotch area of its team's ski suits. They added extra material and weight meant to pull the suits down enough that it would give the skiers more surface area and therefore more lift. Apparently, it was very sophisticated, could not be seen with the naked eye, but the team was caught on video by a whistleblower doctoring the suits. Those suits were then seized and examined, and sure enough, they were padded out with extra material. So that now has a wave of repercussions, including the suspension of 2 of the country's top skiers. Those skiers now disqualified from a World Cup event this week, and potential Olympic ramifications down the line as well.
Wow. All right. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thanks, Marcy.
Paul McGowan with Morning Sports. Well, still ahead, we are going to be talking about wool. Specifically, those curly locks from sheep, they're the foundation for making felted fabric. We're going to visit a fashion exhibit that's locally happening. It puts a spotlight on wool in its many forms. Let's put a quick spotlight on the commute, though, before we get there, because we have had some calls about up around Highway 16, snowy conditions starting. And, of course, that means when we're all around right around zero in southern Manitoba, it could be a little bit slick out there, black ice. So just take note before you're heading out. Maybe check 511 on the highways before you do. And call us if you spot anything we should pass along, whether it's in the city or out in the rural areas. 788-3093. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -2 right now. We are 1 week out from spring, the official start of spring in 1 week. And today we're going to feel a little springy, a little wintry, a high of 0, but we're expecting snow this morning, ending this afternoon. A couple centimeters. There's also a risk of freezing rain today. The world's biggest retailer has joined Manitoba's fight to get machetes out of the hands of criminals. A spokesperson for Walmart tells CBC News it will no longer sell long-bladed weapons online or at any of its stores in Canada. The move comes after the province imposed strict rules on sales of the weapons. Machetes have been used frequently in violent crimes over the past few years. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says this decision shows Walmart is a good corporate citizen.
This is great news. Not only does this show that our legislation can be effective here in Manitoba. Of course, our focus is on making communities safe in the province of Manitoba, but it's great news, Canada-wide, that this is going to have an impact.
Earlier this week, Amazon said it would not allow online sales of machetes to Manitoba addresses. Questions today about the future of the Bay. CBC asked HBC about potential store closures, but it says no decisions have been finalized. Chi Liao is an associate professor of finance at the Asper School of Business. She says the decline of HBC is part of a larger socio-economic trend.
In Canada, and I think in the US too, there's just not a lot of department stores anymore. Historically, department stores have sort of catered to the middle class. And as that middle class sort of declines, the consumer base for the department store is in decline. So in my neighborhood, there's like $5
Liao hopes a buyer will come in and buy the bay to take it in a new direction. The 354-year-old company filed for creditor protection earlier this month. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly is meeting this hour with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Joly and Rubio are at the G7 Foreign Ministers Summit outside Quebec City. That summit has issues like Ukraine and Gaza on the agenda, but Joly insists she will raise the U.S. tariff campaign as frequently as possible. As for President Donald Trump's ongoing talk of annexing Canada, Rubio says it's not on his agenda. Meanwhile, in Washington, a tariff meeting is set for today on Capitol Hill. Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Ontario Premier Doug Ford are holding talks with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Premier Ford says the goal is to establish a, quote, coherent plan for the tariff road ahead. Liberal leader Mark Carney will be sworn in tomorrow morning as Canada's Prime Minister. The ceremony at Rideau Hall will also include the swearing-in of Carney's cabinet. CBC News has learned it will be significantly smaller than Justin Trudeau's cabinet. Trudeau has 37 ministers. Carney is looking to trim that down to between 15 and 20. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A new law aims to prevent Manitobans from being locked up just because they have a communicable illness. The bill would require all applications to detain people for public health reasons to be heard in open court by a provincial court justice, and they could only be sent to a health facility, not a jail. Leif Jansen at the University of Manitoba's Community Law Centre representing a woman from God's Lake First Nation. She spent a month in jail last year to ensure she got treatment for tuberculosis.
I still don't really understand how that could have happened, how she could have been detained in a prison instead of in a hospital. I hope that these changes prevent that, and it looks like they will in terms of it being much more narrow.
After CBC published a story about Jansen's client in December, Premier Wab Kinew immediately ordered a directive to prevent similar situations. The cast of Rainbow Stage's production of Frozen have been selected.
Do you want to build a snowman?
Sure do.
It doesn't have to be a snowman.
Go away, Anna.
Okay, bye.
Hundreds auditioned for the musical more than a month ago, and yesterday, the 5 actresses chosen to play Anna and Elsa came together for the first time. 9-year-old Emmeline Arnold will play one of 2 young Annas.
Anna's a hero. She saved Elsa, and I get to be Anna, so I get to be a hero.
10-year-old Layla North will be playing young Elsa. She fell in love with the music when she was just 2.
You don't need to actually have a man or another person to find true love. It can be sisterly love.
Frozen premieres at Rainbow Stage on August 7th, and already the theater says they have sold a record number of tickets. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I was just Googling, Heather. Frozen came out in 2013.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I know. I kind of had the same reaction. So when you're hearing people talk about growing up with it, and I was trying to do the math of how old people would have been, right? Yeah, it's wild. What I always loved about it is how it shows that, because I have a sister, so it shows the different sister personalities.
Yes.
And always, ones that, often at least in my house, it worked this way, ones that, I'm not the snuggly sister. The other one's always like, can I sleep with you? Let's hug.
Aw.
I love all those relationship pieces. Can't wait to see this. I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather's in our news department live throughout the morning, of course, and online rather. She's always on time too, but online anytime. You can also check out stories as they're evolving at cbc.ca/Manitoba. So check it out. Stay close. Right now, let's find out how weather's evolving. It's time for our regional forecast on CBC at 7:36. Here again is Abby.
Good morning once again. Across the province, we're going to see a mix of snow, clouds, and a chance of freezing rain in a lot of the regions. The snow will be tapering off down south sometime in the afternoon, and then that freezing rain takes over. In Winnipeg, we're still at -2. That's light snow should start any moment from now. That will taper off as we get into the afternoon, with a risk of freezing rain coming on the heels of that. Breezy conditions will be hanging around for most of the day. We'll see highs around 0. Similar conditions in the Pembina Valley region, -1 at this time. Snow also starting soon, ending around the noon period. Brandon is sitting at -3. We're already seeing light snow in that part of the province. That should clear by the noon period. Then the risk of freezing rain follows. In the Parkland region, Dauphin is sitting at -8 and cloudy at this time. We have fog in that part of the province. That should clear up, and then you see some light snow also building up, high around -5. Gimli, currently -8 with snow beginning also soon. That will taper off in the afternoon with some breezy conditions. In the Parkland Front, -25 and mostly cloudy. Snow will start this evening. That part of the province is expecting about 5 to 10 centimeters of snow with this system coming, and you see highs around -11. In Thompson, Churchill, both sitting at -30 at this time. Thompson is clear. Churchill is seeing ice crystals. Both regions will be seeing wind chill close to -40. So the weather varies from snow and breezy conditions in the south with cold and clear skies up north. But down south, we'll be seeing snow and freezing rain. Right now, Winnipeg, -2.
All right, thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Chloe Friesen's filling in for Corey Funk today, and let's get to our commute.
Hello. Yeah, no major issues, but the conditions are the real talker when it comes to the commute, especially the highways, because we are kind of in that freeze-thaw kind of zone with the precipitation makes for potentially slippery conditions. Looking at Manitoba 511, we've got a lot of partly covered highways in southern Manitoba. So spots around like Brandon, partly covered highways. And then if you move further south to Boissevain, Killarney, Cartwright, those are fully covered highways with snow. So do watch out for that if you are traveling in those areas. Even here in Winnipeg on my commute, it was a little more slippery than I was expecting. So give yourself some extra time to make those stops. If you see anything or if you have any tips on highway conditions, if you are traveling, we would love to hear from you. You can call our commuter line at 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Chloe. Chloe Friesen in for Corey today. Well, it's 20 minutes now to 8 o'clock on your Thursday morning, March the 13th. And next on the show, curly locks from sheep are the foundation for making felted fabric. You might know this, but an exhibit in the St. Norbert Arts Centre puts a spotlight on wool in its many forms. Next on the program, community reporter for CBC Shanley Vidal has a story of 2 Winnipeg artists that have interlocked their styles to show how farm meets future fashion.
It's art you can wear. It also has a message about the cycle of life. I'm Shanley Vidal, and I'm here at the St. Norbert Arts Centre. A new exhibit is showing that wool is more than just a textile. Over and over and over again. You rub it back and forth in the palm of your hand. Eventually you can rub it on the table once it has some structure, but this is wet felting.
That's Maureen Winnicki Lyons. The wool artist is creating long, kelp-like fringes of felt by hand to adorn a vest. Those fringes aren't attached by glue or thread. Instead, the felt is fused together.
The coils and the locks are needle felted, which is poking, violent poking, into the felt here, which is commercially prepared and perfect for this purpose. I think it's fantastic.
This item is part of a nautical-themed exhibit she created with designer Tijan Roscoe. Both women work with wool, but on opposite ends. Roscoe uses her background in science and architecture as her inspiration.
Mine is really more geometry and mathematics base, and then aggregation of the processes, and very architectural. And then on the other hand, Maureen knows her shepherds and the name of the goats and then the sheep, and it is just so close to kind of the origin of this wool.
This is the Hungarian raka.
Right. And then
these are the Navajo churro locks.
And then our pieces of cuts are integrated into both kind of a wool locks themselves, and then also needle felted pieces, so that they can kind of coil around one common circle to be worn around the neck area.
The work that I do represents man's most primitive attachment to wool, because people have been keeping sheep and using wool as a means to keep themselves warm and safe for millennia. And then so I'm like the cave woman, and then Tijan represents the person of the future who's found a way to interlock, not just through the act of felting, but by creating pieces of felt that fit together in ways that I can't even conceive of.
This is called cage skirt. The pieces of the flower components, they're cut out of thinner material and then embedded or interlocked into the thicker felt scaffold. So it creates this cage-like piece as a metaphor for fishermen cages in the bottom of the sea.
We hope to challenge people's perception of what wool can do and what felt can be.
And then the beauty of this particular piece is that they lock and then kind of give to it and expand and then collapse again. Maybe we can just kind of work with these two, kind of amalgamate. This has a little bit of a give to it.
There's places that we could tuck in locks in this.
What do you think?
I think I like it.
Tijan Roscoe recently returned from New York Fashion Week. Interlock is on display until March 28th at the Women of Vision Gallery at the St. Norbert Arts Center. Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Wow, the colors and the intricacies and some of the way they roll the wool in their hands almost look like long dreads, but then you imagine them around as a skirt, and those flowers, just such intricate layered pieces to make the petals and make them really three-dimensional. Just that cage skirt she was showing, gorgeous. There's a video to accompany this. You can check it out online if you'd like. That is Shanley Vidal, our community reporter with the story. By the way, nearly all of the wool used in their exhibit for the two artists comes from Manitoba sheep. It is right now 7:44 a.m. and you're going to be pulling out your wool today for sure, because our temperatures are going to be taking a dip here in the next couple of days. We're going to get some freezing rain. We have a risk of that early this afternoon. We have snow coming early this morning as well, and we're watching the system move in. We have already snow reported around Highway 16 and Nipoa area. In Winnipeg currently, we're still remaining at -2. Much different situation in the other part of the province, the north. Thompson is at -32. That is your cold spot this morning. So as I mentioned, you're for sure not putting away the woolly stuff yet. Well, next on the show, you might have heard a bit of this on World Report, but we can't resist. Rick Astley is going to be on cue today. Rick Astley became, of course, a global superstar in the 80s with his hits, right? Never Gonna Give You Up and Together Forever. But you may not know that then he actually left the business. However, the internet craze called Rickrolling brought him back. And you probably know he became one of the biggest celebs on the web. So later this morning, he's going to be talking about the wacky world of how this all happened and international popularity. But first, yeah, we're going to do it. Get out your 80s moves, everybody. Here's Rick Astley and Never Gonna Give You Up on CBC.
We're no strangers to love. You know the rules, and so do I. I feel commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just wanna tell you how I'm feeling. Gotta make you understand. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and
It's one of those tunes, people. It gets in your head, and you can't help but dance, I don't think, when you hear that song. What a story, though. Rick Astley tried to leave music and just kept being pulled back in. Rick Astley's never going to give you up. So you can catch his interview with Tom Power later this morning on CBC Radio's Q. It is now 12 minutes to 8 o'clock on CBC. Hopefully you're having a great Thursday morning. Thanks so much for joining us this morning on the show. Coming up, we do have our regular monthly interview with Premier Wab Canoe. So today we're going to ask about what getting tougher with the U.S. on tariffs looks like from a Manitoba perspective. What could our next move be, especially when it comes to our energy exports? So we'll find out about that. And also with all of this talk about buying Canadian, but also traveling in Canada, you might have heard the Currents doing a Canadian travel bucket list for folks that don't want to go to the States this summer. So we're going to ask the Premier what's on his Canadian travel bucket list. That's coming up on the program after 8 o'clock. Next on the show, though, let's build on what we've heard in the news about the Hudson Bay Company. It may soon close its doors. Some Winnipeggers call it, quote, heartbreaking. Earlier this week, news broke that Canada's oldest retailer has filed for creditor protection and may have to shut down around half of its stores across Canada. Now, the company will not say yet what this means for Winnipeg stores, so the fate of the last two stores in our city hangs in the balance. CBC's Matt Humphrey spoke with some shoppers at the Bay at CF Polo Park.
My name's Donna Galloway.
Jack Simpson.
Troy Richards. What goes through your mind when you hear about a potential closure of this location?
I'm absolutely heartbroken. What is it, like 355 years? I used to work for the Bay quite a few years ago, and I loved my job. I loved working for the Bay. I loved everything about it. It's like when you think about, okay, Sears gone, like Eaton's gone, you know, the department stores gone. It's just the history of it. And just to see that go by the wayside in our time, I'm absolutely heartbroken. This is where I go to get like the nice things I want to get, and where am I going to go now?
I remember going to it when Eaton's didn't have something that I really wanted, and it was just a place to go hang out as a kid, 50, 60 years ago. But it's going to be a big loss because a lot of people depend upon it, and it's just another sort of nail in the coffin, I guess, of brick and mortar stores.
The Bay's always kind of been around for Winnipeg. It's a hallmark, the staple in Winnipeg. In my opinion, I think it's something else that's going to come in, maybe more Americanized. Not saying it's bad or not, but it's just less of a Canadian touch, in my opinion.
So those are some of the people speaking with CBC's Matt Humphrey. He was speaking to Winnipeg shoppers at the Bay located in CF Polo Park. To talk about the bigger picture of this, former Winnipegger Rob Warren is a longtime retail expert and business professor, now at the University of North Dakota. But we reached him to talk about what the possible closure of the iconic store could mean for shopping malls and the retail industry, because as we said, over the years, he's long reported on the history of the Bay. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how are you feeling about the possibility of the Bay having to shutter stores in Canada? What's your reaction to this?
It's heartbreaking that the Bay, who's been around since 1670, is having to consider closing stores because the market has just changed to the extent that they're not as relevant as they used to be.
And not as relevant. Why? We've heard another retail analyst in the news this morning saying it has to do with the disappearance of the middle class. This is in her view, and that sort of department stores don't connect anymore, and maybe even things are being replaced by more dollar type stores. Is it connected to the different classes of financial families and disappearing middle class?
Well, we really have seen the disappearance of the middle class, and I think that was the hallmark of every department store. And we really do see throughout North America this real split in income between the rich and the poor, or the lower class. How's that? That's probably a better way of saying it. And the middle class itself is just being taken apart. And that took away part of the model. Now, the other thing is that other retail formats have popped up over the past 30 years that have also taken a big chunk out of the department stores as well. We've seen the rise of big box players. We've seen the rise of specialty stores, which have kind of taken away some of the clothing style. We've seen the advent of fast fashion. And then, of course, the big thing we've seen over the last 30 years is the rise of online shopping.
Do you think that the nostalgia for department stores, like how much of it lies in, would it have been older? Is there age difference here? Older generations that would have more supported department stores, or does that not wash when you look at the trends?
No, when I look at the trends, what I see is if you ask anybody under the age of 30 about a department store, they look at you like you're talking about an alien from another world. It's not something that they're used to at all. People of my generation, your generation, we remember the department stores in their heydays. And that was only 40 years ago, where they were at the pinnacle of their power. Now, what we've seen is this gigantic shift in the way that the retail market is set up and what consumers are looking for that has really taken away from their core market.
Now, Sears, of course, already, companies like Sears already couldn't make a go of it, and now we see the Bay. Why is the Bay, in the context of things, significant, or does it have even bigger significance to say that this trend is really taking hold?
In the Bays, it's significant for the fact that it's the last real department store in Canada. And the reason that they've been able to hang on a bit longer than some of the other players like Eaton's or Sears is because of the market that they catered to. They were really catering to that kind of upper middle class, upper class marketplace where people were still going to department stores because they wanted those fashionable items. But what we've seen is in the post-COVID era that even those markets have softened up quite a bit and they're not buying as much as they used to. And because of that, that market is also disappearing. And in my opinion, that's probably the main reason they're in the position they're in today.
What does this mean for, in Winnipeg malls in Polo Park, St. Vital, the two bays are still anchor tenants. What does that mean for the idea of an anchor tenant and for malls overall moving forward?
The concept of the anchor tenant is going to have to change. Originally, department stores were considered to be the anchor. They were the gravity well, if you will, that drew people in because they wanted to see what the department stores had. And in the clip you played just before the interview, the one gentleman talked about, look, if I couldn't find it in one location, I went to the Bay because I knew that they would have it. That was what they depended on, is the people coming into the department stores looking for shopping goods, maybe purchasing something inside that department store and then going out into the rest of the mall to buy either complementary merchandise or an accessory to the piece that they bought. But today, with younger consumers not looking at the department store as the anchor, they just don't serve that particular function anymore. And for a mall, they're going to have to find new ways to draw people in. And that's where you start to take a look at turning the shopping experience into a real experience so that going to a bricks and mortar store is something that you look forward to and delivers something other than just the ability to purchase a piece of merchandise.
Now, to be clear here, we don't know if the stores in Winnipeg are going to be closing as part of this announcement. We'll watch that when we get things confirmed, or we'll watch what's going to happen next, I should say. But do you have memories of the Bay? You and I are of the same vintage, Rob. I know I certainly have lots of thoughts about the Bay. Mostly mine were downtown. How about you?
Well, mine are downtown as well. I remember getting on the bus and going downtown with my grandmother to visit the Bay as a little kid. And then as I got older, you'd still go downtown to the Bay because that was the store. To me, that's what a department store was. It had the big aisles. It had the massive displays. It was where you went to find whatever it was you were looking for because you knew that the department store was going to have it. I've got slightly less memories of the Unicity store because I grew up in St. James, so that was the one closest to me. But to me, that was just another mall store that you went to. But it was the downtown store with that impressive building and everything else that really drew you in. And I remember things like, the Christmas displays or riding the escalator or the elevators.
Yeah.
And just all the experiences that you'd have being in the store.
Thank you very much for weighing in on this from your retail perspective. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Rob Warren with us via Zoom live on CBC, former Winnipegger, now a professor at the University of North Dakota, but he's reported on the Bay for many years. A representative for the Hudson Bay, as I mentioned, tells CBC no decision regarding the future of the two remaining stores in Winnipeg, the Bays, has been finalized. We are asking you this morning, we just don't have time to get to a listener line right now, but you're calling us and you're writing on Facebook as well. We've asked you today, with hearing that the Hudson Bay Company may soon close, you've heard the retail analysts and what they have to say about, the disappearance of middle class, or maybe generationally, people not tying to, not thinking about department stores as a big thing, not shopping there. We're wondering how you view all of this, how you shop, what your thoughts are. 788-3205 or on Facebook. We'll get those comments on after 8. Right now, we do have to go to Heather Wells for our headlines.
Good morning. Well, after pleas from the Manitoba government, Walmart is pulling machetes from its website and from store shelves right across Canada. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says they understand the impact these weapons have on our streets. And the cast has been chosen.
Do you want to build a snowman?
1,000 hopefuls auditioned wanting to build that snowman for Rainbow Stage's August production of Frozen, including 300 young people. We'll hear from them, a couple of them, coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Could be a little snowy on the highways. Check before you go at 511. -2 in Winnipeg. We're going to be around 0 today. The Premier and our monthly interview coming up live on CBC after 8.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Did you know the guy behind Never Gonna Give You Up gave up music at 27? The global superstar Rick Astley was ready to walk away until the Rickroll craze on the internet brought him back. He'll be here to tell you that and some news stories from his memoir, Never. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
John Green had a massive bestseller with his novel The Fault in Our Stars. He's now using his fame to shine a light on how tuberculosis is affecting the lives of people around the world. John Green on how tuberculosis is everything, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
I said to Secretary Lutnick, Howard, we're on a race to the basement here. There's no prize to get to the basement first.
Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc speaking about tariffs and counter-tariffs. He, Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford will join Canada's Ambassador Kirsten Hillman in Washington today for high-level talks with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The meeting comes as the trade war between the two countries is ratcheting up. The CBC's Sarah Levitt is in Washington. Sarah, what are we expecting from today's meeting?
Well, this is another face-to-face meeting between Lutnick and LeBlanc, but things have considerably escalated since the last time they spoke. LeBlanc has said he's going in with optimism. Perhaps not that the Trump administration removes the tariffs immediately, but more to calm things down a bit, to stop the back and forth between Canada and the U.S., or even the continued threat of slapping more tariffs on Canada, as President Trump has said. But LeBlanc has also said the U.S. can't expect Canada to sit idly by while the country's economy is threatened.
They knew we were going to respond, but that I hope we could get to a position where we can lower the temperature and figure out how to get to their April 2nd date for their reciprocal tariff decisions, where we can respect the free trade agreement between Canada and the United States and remove all these tariffs.
Lutnick has used that exact same phrase, by the way, wanting to lower the temperature.
Meanwhile, Sarah, what reaction has there been in the U.S. to the trade war?
There's a lot more awareness that this is going on now. A few weeks ago, the tariffs on Canada weren't much of a talking point here. Now it's front page news. Above the fold of the Wall Street Journal today is all tariff talk, featuring a photo of Prime Minister-designate Mark Carney. The Washington Post has a headline, quote, "Warnings of more trade war escalations." That's not to say President Trump doesn't have support. He has said this is all about bolstering American production, and some are saying in the long run, these tariffs will do just that.
CBC's Sarah Levitt in Washington. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Trump is threatening to retaliate against the European Union's counter-tariffs. In a social media post, the U.S. president says if the EU does not immediately abandon its 50% tax on American whiskey, he will impose a 200% tariff on European wines, champagnes, and other alcoholic products. U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick told Bloomberg this should come as no surprise.
How many times do I have to say national security is important? And if you do like the EU and you respond by putting a tariff on Kentucky bourbon, which used to piss off Mitch McConnell, which doesn't really matter anymore, you got to wonder, really, do I have to deal with this stuff? But alas, we do.
The EU tariff on whiskey is part of its response to U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum. Now that the detailed list of Canada's retaliatory tariffs is public, we're getting a clearer picture, of how shoppers in this country will be affected. Janice McGregor has been taking a closer look in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, we know there's a price to pay for hitting back at the U.S. with counter tariffs. What is that price?
John, if you need stuff for a summer camping trip, the axe you cut your firewood with, the candles, lamps, or flashlights you use to see at night, the sleeping bag you crawl into, all those things are now going to be 25% more expensive if they come from the U.S. Where possible, it appears the government has targeted things that are nice to have, not things you need to have with this list. You don't see a lot of food on it. It's not really targeted this time, although some of the dishes you need to eat that food are. There's equipment for hobbies like golf clubs that are getting hit. Because Canada exports more steel and aluminum to the U.S. in dollar terms than it imports in return, to match the value of this tariff, dollar for dollar, the government had to hit things beyond just metal products. But Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc also said yesterday that they're still studying the U.S. list to tally up its impact on Canada. And it is possible that Canada is going to have to add more to this list if it finds its estimate of about $30 billion worth of impacted trade was actually a bit too low. And of course, there's another list in the wings of additional U.S. products that Canadians will start paying tariffs on if the Trump administration proceeds with plans to apply more global tariffs in early April. LeBlanc was asked if it's going to be awkward to implement that if there's an election underway by then. He said civil servants can just press go on the longer list when it's warranted, bringing the total value of U.S. goods facing tariffs in Canada as high as $155 billion.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Meanwhile, Liberal leader Mark Carney will be sworn in as Prime Minister tomorrow morning. And so will his new cabinet at a ceremony at Rideau Hall in Ottawa. CBC News has learned Carney's cabinet will be much smaller, perhaps just 15 to 20 ministers, down from Justin Trudeau's 37. U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is reportedly now in Moscow. He's expected to take part in talks on the 30-day ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. The deal was agreed to by Kyiv earlier this week. Russia, though, has not yet responded. The CBC's Anna Cunningham has more from London.
There's a lot riding on this meeting in Moscow. Ukraine wants peace, says Ukraine's ambassador to Canada, Yulia Kovalev. Speaking to CBC News, she says the deal for a 30-day ceasefire agreed in Jeddah is vital.
This could be an important first step to the long and lasting peace. That's now from Russia to demonstrate where they are.
But President Vladimir Putin did not show signs of wanting peace Wednesday. He was seen dressed in army camouflage visiting troops in the Kursk region, telling his forces to destroy the enemy in Kursk in the shortest timeframe possible. Ukraine's army commander, General Alexander Syrskyi, says his troops are pulling back to minimize losses. In military speak, that is a withdrawal. Doubts remain about Putin's willingness to agree to peace.
They're going to make up things that they say that they want in order to discuss a ceasefire.
Kirk Volker is the former U.S. Special Representative to Ukraine during President Donald Trump's first term.
What they really want to do is continue fighting and taking territory.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova repeating today that any peacekeeping Western troops in Ukraine would be considered a direct involvement in the conflict with Russia. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
5 years after COVID was declared a pandemic, scientists are warning of the possibility of another. This one, the H5N1 virus or bird flu. The virus mutates and spreads quickly and can infect humans. As Jennifer Yuen reports, Canadian public health experts are working to contain the threat.
You're preparing the plate with the antigen and then
Dr. Linda Huang examines a blood sample at the Public Health Lab at the BC Centre for Disease Control. She's developing an antibody test for bird flu and one of many Canadian scientists ramping up preparations against the virus many fear could cause the next pandemic.
It's a matter of when, not so much if, when avian influenza will affect humans.
A recent study suggests H5N1 is just one mutation away from being more transmissible between humans. There have already been 2 severe cases in North America, a BC teen who was hospitalized for 2 months and a senior in Louisiana who died. It's circulating widely in wild birds and in American cows.
These infectious agents don't respect borders.
Toronto family doctor Andrew Pinto leads a federally funded project preparing Canada for the next pandemic. He worries scientists will have a hard time sharing data, research, and information quickly.
But if a new pandemic was to hit tomorrow, we would struggle with certain things. We would struggle with kind of information coordination, making sure the same evidence is reaching different decision makers.
International cooperation is crucial in monitoring and curbing the spread of bird flu, he says. And with birds starting to fly north this year, it'll be crucial that American and Canadian scientists keep collaborating. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally, Quebec company Couche-Tard is still pushing ahead with its efforts to take over Japan's 7-Eleven chain of convenience stores. And today it made its case directly to the Japanese public. CEO Alex Miller.
We believe there'll be significant interest in what we are doing. We will stand that up with world-class management, world-class infrastructure, and really high-quality sites.
Couche-Tard, which already owns Circle K, is offering $47 billion to the owner of 7-Eleven. It's been pursuing this takeover since last August. If it's successful, Couche-Tard would control about 20,000 convenience stores in the United States alone, but there are 85,000 7-Elevens globally. So far, its owner is stonewalling the bid. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you're enjoying World Report and the podcast, please tell a friend or rate and review us. It helps spread the word. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. We got that turn in our weather coming today, so mixed bag of things going on all over the province. Could be a bit slick. Thanks for joining us live in downtown Winnipeg. You're on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. So this half hour on the program, we are going to be dipping into the Hudson Bay and the announcement that they may be no more. We still don't know the fate of the 2 Winnipeg stores, but you've been calling us and you've also been writing to us. Some of you attached to department store shopping, some of you completely not attached to that model of shopping, and also some of you with memories here in the Winnipeg store you're just sharing. So we'll get all of that on with our director, Chloe Friesen. But this half hour, our interview is with Premier Wab Canoe, our monthly interview. So if Manitoba needs to get tougher with the United States over tariffs, what could our next move be, especially when it comes to energy exports? We'll ask the Premier about that and more. Stay with us. First to developing news otherwise, Heather Wells joins us. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, we'll also be talking about HBC, and if you shop there, you may not be doing it much longer. An expert in finance says you are likely to see HB stores closing in the near future as Canada's oldest retailer files for creditor protection. Chi Liao at the Asper School of Business says department stores historically cater to the middle class, but as the middle class declines, department stores are being replaced by other stores like Dollarama. And Manitoba's crusade to get machetes off the street has been joined by the world's biggest retailer. Walmart says it will no longer sell long-bladed weapons online or at any of its stores across Canada. The move after the province imposed strict rules on sales of machetes used frequently in violent crimes over the past few years. I'll be back with more details, more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Abby, Adiemi, what's going on out there?
We're already seeing that snow in the Dauphin region, Brandon, Gimli, Morden, Winkler, all the way from the south into the city. We're already seeing the snow starting in that part of the province. For Winnipeg right now, we're still expecting it to roll in. We're going to see snow this morning. That's your tipper of this afternoon. We do have that risk of freezing rain this afternoon once the snow tapers off. We will be seeing about 2 centimeters, and we'll warm up to 0 today. So it's more like a snowy morning, clearing this afternoon, and a chance of freezing rain to come with that. But right now, we are now at -4 in the city.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Chloe Friesen, you had some early calls about snow around Highway 16. I don't know how it's going now.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. We heard about snow covering the highway a bit there in that area, just around Russell to Minnedosa. So could be a bit slick, a bit slippery. But we did recently hear about Highway 75 between Morris and Rosenort. There's a lot of snow. So drive very carefully along that highway, especially with these fluctuating temperatures that can kind of cause that melting and freezing. As well, I got a call from Ron, who mentioned that there are emergency crews on scene at Redwood and Main. Some of the southbound lanes are partially blocked. You can get through, but things might get a bit slowed down as we enter rush hour here. So Redwood and Main, do watch out for that. And do be careful on those highways. Check Manitoba 511. They have that full list of which highways are partly covered. A lot of southern Manitoba is fully covered on those highways there. So do be careful. If you have anything to add to that list of commuter knowledge issues, give us a call, 204-788-3093.
And watch for Corey Funk, who's hitting the highway, our associate producer. You may have heard Communities in Focus is going to be focusing on the southeast corner, including Morden and Winkler. We have live information radio shows planned for next week. So Corey's just heading out to those communities today to check out some of our technical needs and hear and talk to people. We will be in Morden, we will be in Winkler next Thursday, March 20th. So we're confirmed our show will be at the Triangle Oasis restaurant. And then our live information radio morning show from Morden is going to be on Tuesday. And so we're just, we'll announce the location tomorrow. We're just firming a couple of details up, but we will be in those communities next week. Really looking forward to it. I know that I visited with my girlfriends on kind of one of a day trips because it's such a growing area of the province, of course, and as it happens, a real hub of manufacturing, and it has been that for many years. So that's Morden and Winkler for Communities in Focus next week. Well, while we're talking about manufacturing and tariffs, that's going to lead us into our monthly interview with Premier Wab Kinew, who has been waiting here to talk to us in studio. Thank you for being here live.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. And if I could just say one piece of advice, don't confuse Morden with Winkler when you're down there in the Pembina Valley. There is a very intense rivalry between the two communities, and so you might get people's ire up if you do the same thing next week. So a little friendly advice.
We will not do that. We're actually going to start talking tariffs a little bit here because we're going to start with an answer to a question I got yesterday on the show. Hunter Wire's longtime owner, Rick Koss, was on. We were asking him about what he and other businesses needed from the federal and provincial leaders like yourself now that the steel tariff has kicked in. So that was the question. Here's how he answered.
Personally, I'm really impressed with the response, in particular from Doug Ford. I'm sorry that so many of the premiers have let Doug Ford do the heavy lifting in this because it was his response that really got Washington's attention. I would sure like to see something stronger from the other premiers. There's been some discussion. I mean, EB and Canoe have talked about we can't tolerate this and we can't put up, but they haven't put anything on the table yet.
I think there's a proposal that Canoe has putting forward. He said they would consider not giving U.S. contracts when it comes to hydro development.
Right, but all of that is just consideration. There's been nothing put on the table. We're still talking about it. I would like to see something significant and something put forward and said, this is what we're going to do.
Now, Premier, we actually had a discussion earlier this morning about, the approaches, all the different premiers across Canada and different approaches with Trump. Right. What's your thought on getting tougher with Trump?
We have to be strategic, and we have to remember that this is a 4-year presidency that we're dealing with. So we definitely have some big trump cards, if you will, including with Manitoba Hydro, with electricity. We've got big tools with procurement. When you think about Manitoba Hydro, $31 billion in transformers and power line equipment that's going to be purchased over the next 2 decades. That's a huge amount of money. Premier Ford, I spoke to him yesterday, as well as all the other premiers. He's down there in D.C. today. We'll see how that meeting goes. We'll see what the Trump administration does with these steel and aluminum tariffs, and we'll continue to be there to support jobs and the economy here. But we have to be judicious when we're thinking about how to play these cards and our next steps.
Now, if you need to get tougher, what triggers that? Like, how do you decide, for example, if you will bar U.S. companies from taking part in Manitoba hydro infrastructure projects moving forward?
I think there's two things. The first is if the Trump administration adds more tariffs to Canada, or if they follow through with some of these upcoming deadlines, like say on April 2nd, and we see that 25% across the board, that'll be one. But the other thing we're watching is how long are these tariffs going to be applied for? So we started seeing the steel and aluminum tariffs, right? And if these go into next week, if they go into place a few weeks, then I think that that's going to be one of the things that triggers a response from us using one of these additional tools that we have in the toolbox. So right now, we're trying to negotiate. We're trying to cooperate with the U.S. when it makes sense for our own interests here in Manitoba. Things like the border, cracking down on fentanyl, big drug bust yesterday, for example. At the same time, though, when it comes to issues like protecting steelworkers in Selkirk and in Winnipeg and other parts of the province, that's where we're pushing back with things like banning American companies and their booze from the province.
I got to ask about hydro, two more questions because of what
Sure.
you've said you could have on the table. So regarding contracts with the states, what have you learned about our ability to apply export fees?
So the export fees would potentially apply on spot market sales. So basically, we kind of have three main lanes that we could use with Manitoba Hydro. One is we can take a look at the firm contracts that are in place and decide whether or not we want to renew those things or go in a different direction in the future. We got the spot market. That's basically when we have extra power, so to speak. There's high water levels in Manitoba. We just sell that day to day on the MISO market that we're a part of. That's where we could apply a surcharge, potentially 25%. And then we've also got the procurement. And like I said, the procurement is a huge, huge tool. Like one order of equipment is going to be in the tens of millions of dollars, and we do that multiple times a year. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars over the next decade.
Regarding what you talked about in terms of renewing contracts, if you get to a place where you're not going to be renewing contracts, I mean, where else do we go?
Right here in Manitoba, I would say would be the first one. There's tons of companies looking to expand. There's manufacturers looking to set up shop here. Housing developments that we're looking to stand up both in the capital region and in the Pembina Valley, which you're going to go see next week, other parts of the province too. So I think the first place we look is right here at building up our own economy here in Manitoba. And then, of course, hey, east to west, if we can partner with other provinces to help them meet their energy needs, let's focus on that. We've got some really good export contracts with Saskatchewan, but if we could work with the other western provinces, Ontario and others across the board, even going north potentially to Nunavut to help stand up their mining industry, there's a lot of opportunity to invest in our country's future.
Long term, though, I think we've got the short term problem right now, right? Because obviously, when we're talking about projects, we're not talking about or even opportunities or east west. I mean, these are massive undertakings. We've been talking about east west for 3 decades. Mm-hmm. Just last on this, I want to ask about your tone with Trump. I mean, you have tried to adopt I think you said even the elbows up quote in the Mike Myers, if we need. Tough in the corners might have been your quote, but you have adopted more of the friendly, even cheeky when you were signing the liquor order. You were
that got a lot of attention.
Yeah, it did get a lot of attention. Yeah. That's obviously been deliberate.
Yeah,
to walk the line. When do you change tact, or do you, or as you said at the beginning, is this you're going to stay trying to walk that line of being friendly?
Well, I think one of the things we don't ever want to see in this relationship with the U.S. is us change who we are as Canadians. And to me, I'm trying to have that friendly Manitoba approach of, yes, we're always going to talk to our neighbors in North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, in D.C. as well. But at the same time, if we get provoked, we're going to push back. And so we have been pushing back when the American administration takes damaging moves to our economy. And then at the same time, hey, part of this is a meme war, right? Like they're talking down Canada. They're going after our prime minister. So I would expect that whoever in the White House is doing that is going to have a sense of humor too. So we can chirp back with things like the executive order video. And, if it helps to make the choir stronger here in Manitoba by preaching to our domestic audience and letting people know that we continue to maintain a good sense of humor, then I think that that's part of the equation too.
What was the most critical thing that came out of your meeting with the premiers yesterday that you can share with us?
I think it was a reiteration that we're all on the same page and we're going to stand together. And what I want to acknowledge, especially for the ag folks listening to this, is we are facing a trade war on two fronts now, right? The U.S. is doing what they're doing to us, but China has also applied tariffs on our ag products, notably pork and canola for our province here. So we're facing two fronts here. A country of our size, the only way we have a fighting chance in a situation like that is if we all stick together. Unity has to be the fundamental piece of our response, both to the States and to China. And so a bunch of interesting discussions about ag, energy, oil, you name it, in that conversation with the premiers. But the thing that I was pushing for and the thing that we came out of that call with was like a unified approach. And then, of course, a call to the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, that we need to meet as soon as possible once he's sworn in. Get
Have you
all
ever
those
met him?
leaders. Yes, I have.
You have met Mark Carney, the Prime Minister designate, in the past?
Yeah, and I spoke to him recently by phone as well too.
What are your thoughts on the selection and how your relationship through a Manitoba lens with Mark Carney?
Well, right now we just need to all get on the same page because we're going to head into a federal election. Everybody knows that that's going to be the reality. At the same time, you see what's happening in the White House or with Donald Trump and his administration each day. It can change multiple times a day. So if the Prime Minister and the other party leaders at the federal level are out there campaigning, who's sticking up for Canada in the meantime?
So you're anxious for that meeting?
Well, the premiers have shown, I think, over the past few months that we'll step up in the leadership role. We'll defend this country's interests. But I think we just need to have that solid understanding of who is going to look after which side of the shop, if you will.
8:23, Premier Wab Kinew live with us for our monthly interview here on CBC. I do want to ask you about a story because it was on the show this morning earlier. The Fuster family, they say their mom, Debbie, died while waiting for bypass surgery. They're calling for legislation where a patient would be told if they couldn't get treatment in time and given out-of-province options if that were the case, like if you're on the waiting list. They're calling it Debbie's Law. I'm wondering what you think of that proposal, that you would inform people on the wait list.
Well, I think first I want to express my condolences and to say that this is just heartbreaking. Like what they experienced is so sad, and we send our best wishes to them as they navigate this difficult period. And our health minister has said that they'll look at this proposal. And I just want to be clear with everybody tuning into this story. What this family is asking for is what the health system is supposed to deliver. When you need life-saving medical attention, you're supposed to get it within the time period that it's needed. Like that is the bedrock of our healthcare system. So clearly something failed here and they didn't get that. So I think the other thing that we need to have the conversation about is how do we ensure that somebody who needs a life-saving medical intervention gets it? And that's definitely a big focus for our team. With heart stuff in particular in Manitoba, St. B is where the specialists are, right? St. Boniface Hospital. For whatever reason, the previous government dismantled the Cardiac Center of Excellence. One of the things that we're doing is rebuilding that Cardiac Center of Excellence. That's a part of it, but clearly something else needs to take place here because, again, if you need a life-saving procedure, you should get it within the window of opportunity for it to make a difference. And so I want us to keep focused on delivering that.
So when it comes to waitlists, I want to ask you this specifically for understanding, because Second Street, which is a charitable organization that advocates for healthcare reform, the use of some private healthcare options, says Manitoba doesn't track people who die while on a treatment wait list, like doesn't even track them. And then other people might have questions about if you are at more urgent risk and you're on the wait list, do you automatically bump higher? Do we need to reform how wait lists are structured in the province? And is it true that we don't track those people? And if so, I guess, is it something you'd be interested in starting to track?
I think we'll always look at ways to improve. We'd have to talk to the medical experts about comparing what the rates there look compared to the general population with the same sort of demographics. But what I would say specifically is we have started that work about reforming surgical waits in Manitoba. The SWIM system the Surgical Wait Times Information Management System. Dr. Bichelle, been a big champion of that. It's to address a related issue, which is that because a lot of the, patients waiting for surgeries are kept on a specific list within all the different providers across the province.
Okay.
There wasn't visibility into who all the people were waiting for those procedures. And so those lists were effectively being cherry-picked in the past to try and present an image that was maybe more palatable to the public eye. So now we've sort of knocked down those barriers and created this more centralized system. We do think that we are making positive steps forward when it comes to having a clear picture of what's going on with the weights and all the data related to that.
Do we know if we track if people die while they're on the list? Or what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, no, we'll have to look into that as a follow-up to this issue for sure.
I do want to ask you about something completely unrelated before you go this morning, and this has to do kind of with tariffs, but with the whole Buy Canadian, Travel Canadian.
Right.
The Current on CBC is doing actually a Canadian travel bucket list. So this is for folks that don't want to go to the States this summer. They're switching up their plans, and I wonder what's on your list in Canada to visit.
Well, here in Manitoba, we got a lot of amazing destinations. Everybody always thinks about Churchill, rightfully so. But I would point you to Spirit Sands, this amazing desert that we have in western Manitoba. I would point you to Pajou Falls. And yes, I'm saying it that way because I speak Ojibwe as opposed to Cree, but just outside of Thompson and Paint Lake, the
Other
whole
people
area.
will say Pajou Falls. Yep.
Exactly. And Paint Lake just outside of Thompson, just absolutely beautiful. You got Riding Mountain Park, the mountain bike trails at Northgate, just south of Dauphin, on that side of the Riding Mountain, is an amazing, like you feel like you're in the Rocky Mountains in the middle of those courses. And so there's just so many amazing places to get out and enjoy this province. I really encourage people to do so.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That is Manitoba Premier Wab Canoe live on CBC with our monthly interview.
Campaign songs. Sometimes the songs are written expressly for the political party or candidate.
I'm for president, I'm for president.
Sometimes politicians co-opt pop songs. And sometimes the artists have a big problem with that. Orchestrating elections, political campaign songs on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
Chloe Friesen's in actually now just ahead of the news to talk about the possibility of the Bay closing. We asked where you shop, how your shopping habits are formed.
Hi, yeah. So you posted this on Facebook. We asked our listeners to call in, and we got this call on the listener line here.
Hi, I'm calling about the potential closure of the Bay. And I, as well, when I choose to go shopping, I prefer to go to a department store, for selection, convenient, salesperson's help. And then I have to wonder if they're closing, where am I going to go? What are my options? I'm not buying clothes at the dollar store because I personally choose not to purchase certain items made in other countries, as is now the flavor of the month. And for your producer, in the different age category of shopping, where does that group shop for clothes? Online? A Temu, perhaps? I don't know. I'd be interested in knowing. It may make an option for me.
So she's actually asking you directly.
She's asking me.
So you're going to hold that thought because we're going to go to the news, and then after the news, you're going to have to answer it because she asked you.
I'll share.
We were comparing generationally, different things. The attachment to the department store, and Chloe's from a younger generation, and saying, well, maybe not so much. Wait for after your CBC Winnipeg news for the answer.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, we're dropping. It's -4 right now in downtown Winnipeg. A high today of 0. We're expecting some snow, a couple centimeters beginning early this morning, ending this afternoon. There's also a risk of freezing rain in Winnipeg this afternoon. Manitoba's crusade to get machetes off the street has been joined by the world's biggest retailer. Walmart says it will no longer sell long-bladed weapons online or at any of its stores across Canada. The move comes after the province imposed strict rules on the sales of machetes used frequently in violent crimes over the past few years. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says Walmart decided it was best to simply pull the machetes off its shelves.
It's cleaner to just
stop the sales across the country. But it also shows that they're willing to understand the impact that these weapons are having on our streets, that these are used in violent attacks.
Earlier this week, Amazon announced it would no longer allow online sales of machetes to Manitoba addresses. Well, with Melanie Joly at the head of the table, the G7 foreign ministers are holding talks today outside Quebec City. Ukraine and Gaza are among topics on the official agenda, but in the background are issues like tariffs and Canadian sovereignty. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did not answer reporters when asked if Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada is on the agenda. He was asked this yesterday.
It is not a meeting about how we're going to take over Canada.
Canada's Foreign Minister Joly says Rubio can expect to feel some heat for the United States' role in creating international trade turmoil. Now, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says the goal of his meeting today with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is to get a coherent sense of the Trump administration's plans for tariffs. The meeting in Washington comes days after a dust-up with Donald Trump that ended with Ontario pausing its surcharge on electricity exports to the United States. It also comes as Canada's dollar-for-dollar 25% tariffs on American goods worth $29.8 billion have now gone into effect in retaliation for steel and aluminum tariffs Trump imposed yesterday. Liberal leader Mark Carney will be sworn in tomorrow morning as Canada's Prime Minister. The ceremony at Rideau Hall will also include the swearing in of Carney's cabinet. An expert in finance says you are likely to see HBC stores closing in the near future. Canada's oldest retailer has filed for creditor protection. CBC asked the company what this could mean for Winnipeg's 2 remaining locations, but it says no decisions have been finalized. Chi Liao is an associate professor at the Asper School of Business. She says closures would make sense.
Immediately, you're going to have to close a large number of stores, have liquidation sales. If they can monetize any of the properties or the leases on the properties, that will help create liquidity.
Liao says an outside buyer could still come in and buy HBC and take it in a new direction. An affidavit says the Bay employs almost 200 people in Manitoba. Well, new legislation would ensure Manitobans can no longer be locked up just because they have a communicable illness. The law would require all applications to detain people for public health reasons to be heard in open court by a provincial court justice, and they could only be sent to a health facility, not a jail. Leif Jensen at the University of Manitoba's Community Law Centre represented a woman from God's Lake First Nation. She spent a month in jail last year to ensure she got treatment for tuberculosis. Jensen says the law is a step in the right direction.
When we're putting someone in detention, whether it's in a hospital or jail or even in their own home under what looks a lot like house arrest, having the maximum amount of procedural fairness is important, and a provincial court justice can provide that.
Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the practice of incarcerating people for health reasons is a shameful part of Manitoba's history. The cast of Rainbow Stage's production of Frozen have been selected.
Do you want to build a snowman?
Sure do.
It doesn't have to be a snowman.
Hundreds auditioned for the musical more than a month ago, and yesterday the 5 actresses chosen to play Anna and Elsa came together for the first time. 9-year-old Emmeline Arnold will play one of 2 young Annas.
Anna's a hero. She saved Elsa, and I get to be Anna, so I get to be a hero.
10-year-old Layla North will be playing young Elsa. She fell in love with the musical when she was just 2.
You don't need to actually have a man or another person to find true love. It can be sisterly love.
Frozen premieres at Rainbow Stage this summer, August 7th. Already the theater says it sold a record number of tickets. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
So to the HBC department store question, Generation Shopping Differently. Chloe Friesen, our director. A listener asked where you shop, if not the department store.
I haven't been to a department store in years. I would say I shop correctly online, right? I often shop at locally, I try to get a lot
Lots
of
of
locally
local. Yeah, I
made.
know you do.
I'm wearing a vest today, locally made. But a lot of those stores that are just selling clothes, not a department store per se.
You're looking for the focus.
Yeah.
We've got like 33 comments. It's
So
gone crazy
many
online.
comments.
So we'll try to get some of those on throughout the day here on CBC. You have a quick traffic note, though.
Quick note, fire trucks are blocking the southbound curb lane on Main and College. College is closed at Main.
Abby?
With the freezing rain, be careful and watch out for slippery roads. And up north, it's going to be downright frosty.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you to Chidi Akuma, Marshall Hodgins, Shanley Vidal, Nellie Gonzalez, Leif Larson, Kevin DiPatebo, Abby Adiemi, and Chloe Friesen, Heather Wells, Megan Ketcherson, and Aaron Bruman, our live team and contributors to the show. Stay with us. Currents next on CBC.